Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to 83 Weeks with Eric Bischoff. Eric, what's going on, man? How are you?
I am just, I'm having a great day, man. Early Sunday morning as we're recording this. It's a beautiful day. We have some house guests. My sister-in-law and her husband are here, and they're taking off. So Mrs. B and I will have the house to ourselves for an entire week.
How about that?
I made sure I checked up on my stock of Blue Chew, and I'm good to go. So it's going to be a fun week coming up.
How many days will you run around the house naked?
No, I don't do that. I don't do that.
You encourage Mrs. B to do that
as much as I can.
Yes, absolutely.
There's a big difference.
There is a difference.
But she's I don't want to say shy, but she's a little more conservative in that regard.
Well, I'll tell you who wasn't conservative. WCW in 1999. That's what we're going to be doing today. We're doing a watch along to get you in that Halloween spirit. Of course, as you're listening to this, tomorrow is Halloween. So we thought, hey, man, let's go back and watch a Halloween Havoc. This one from 1999. So without further ado, get your peacock out. We've got a season 11, episode 1, Halloween Havoc, 1999. We've got a 2-hour, 46-minute, and 22-second runtime. Of course, we're going to pay some bills along the way. So we're going to clock in for a 3-hour episode here of 83 Weeks. So without further ado, Eric, I say we get this party started. I think Silva's got us ready, and hopefully you're ready at home with us. Get your peacock ready. Season 11, episode 1, Halloween Havoc, 1999. Here we go. In 3, 2, 1, play. There's the old exploding vagina or cat's asshole logo, depending on who you ask.
I have never been so serious about kicking one man's ass in my life. Since you got that belt, I want it. You can't catch me. I'm gonna get it, or you lose your opportunity. Oh, the hell with that! He touched him! I saw it! He ran over him and he's out! I'm going to rip up your future destination! Sydney's business now! He threw that! Oh my God! He got kicked in the face! Jackknife! Powerbomb Goldberg! Halloween Havoc! I will kick your ass! Promises do not come true in this business. I will not stab the Stinger in the back. The Stinger is back in black. I can't believe Sting used the baseball bat on Hogan. We've all been screwed in this business. Who can you trust? Hulk Hogan. Who's going to get the last laugh? They're going to destroy the legs of Hogan. Yes, I'm going to kick his ass. It's showtime, folks.
So that's how we open Halloween Havoc. We've got two big storylines. Sid and Goldberg on one side, Hogan and Sting on the other. Two big matches. We're in Las Vegas. It doesn't quite feel the same as it has in years past. 1996 Halloween Havoc is maybe my favorite WCW pay-per-view of all time. But I see so many people say that this set is their favorite pay-per-view set of all time. Of course, we see the giant pumpkin, the screens on either side. What would you describe that gargoyle with the nose steam? How would you describe that look and feel, and who deserves some props for this great looking set?
Well, I wasn't there at the time, so I couldn't tell you for sure, but if all things were the same at this point, and I'm sure there were, I doubt there was many changes in terms of production at this point. I would have, but it would have started with David Crockett, but there would have been a lot of other people involved.
This would have been your second pay-per-view that you would have missed. Of course, you go home before the September pay-per-view in 1999. Here we are at the October pay-per-view, and sitting ringside at the desk, sort of recapping how we got here and what to expect tonight, are Tony Schiavone and Bobby the Brain Heenan. Man, I think you and I both just think the absolute world of Tony Schiavone. But I know once upon a time, man, Schiavone and Heenan, they were not best of friends. It felt like it ended poorly there. We would see Bobby write some not so nice things about Tony Schiavone in his book and maybe have some sideways comments and some shoot interviews. Did you know of any perceived heat between the two way back when you worked with them together?
I really didn't. And, I know I've heard that before, but hearing you say it again, really, it surprises me. I don't know how you don't get along with Tony Schiavone. He's just, number one, he's super professional. And regardless if there were raw feelings one way or the other, Tony would have never let that, come through in his work. And he's just a fun guy to be around. So I don't know. Has Tony ever discussed it with you?
He has a little bit off air. He doesn't really want to get into it too much on air because it feels like no matter what you say, you'd be picking on somebody who's no longer able to defend themselves.
Tell me about it.
Yeah. And listen, we've faced that circumstance recently here on our program. We're going to get started here with a cruiserweight title match. This is going to be a fun show. We're going to get things kicked off here with Disco Inferno taking on Lash LaRue. Our old pal Lash LaRue is challenging. Let's track it here. Listen to his entrance a little bit.
First, from Brooklyn, New York, here's the defending WCW Cruiserweight Champion, the Disco Inferno.
So here comes Disco with a fur vest on, and I don't know how you would describe that hat, but it looks like something Gorgeous George has worn in a previous life, maybe.
Yeah, I think he borrowed that from Macho Man Savage's Gorgeous George, the former stripper turned valet. I mean, that does look like a hat a stripper would wear in Vegas, right?
Yes.
No, I could hear the music she'd be dancing to. It'd be Joe Cocker's "You Can Leave Your Hat On." Everything else would come off, but the hat would stay on.
I was saying the other day, I was riding down the road listening to the radio with the wife, and some song came on, and I was like, "Oh, this was a strip club anthem back in the day." And I realized, wow, that was my outside voice. I should have just left that. That's my inside voice. But I do think we need a playlist. So I was hoping to get Lash LaRue and his entrance song here. Let's see what we've got now that we had to listen to Disco.
Louisiana, the Raging Cajun, Lash LaRue.
Alabama's own, from the same hometown as our great close personal friend Cassio Kid. Here he comes. Lash LaRue, who just made, after like a 14-year layoff, his comeback match over Labor Day weekend in Chicago for GCW. Did you get to spend much time with Lash LaRue back in the day? Any good memories of Lash at all?
I did not. I spent more time talking to Lash at the Top Guy event that took place in Alabama, or in Huntsville, not long ago, and really got to know him. What a fantastic human being he is. So number one, he's incredibly talented. Some of the artwork he does is just so great, and it's fun to have and it's fun to own. And just getting to know him a little bit. I mean, he's a really, really solid human being.
Super fun guy, and this is going to be a fun match. Two super fun characters in front of the camera and behind the camera. Disco Inferno and Lash LaRue kicking it off here. It feels a little different. A few years prior to this, we would open the show with like Rey Mysterio and Dean Malenko for the Cruiserweight title. We're certainly leaning heavy into character here. As a reminder, because you touched on it, hey, I wasn't at this show. I believe the date is September 10th, 1999. You get sent home by Harvey Schiller. 2 days later is the Fall Brawl pay-per-view. So we're about a month after that here for Halloween Havoc 1999. But almost immediately after you're gone, they make the big announcement. Hey, Vince Russo is leaving the World Wrestling Federation and bringing his old pal Ed Ferrara down to WCW to take over creative. And that happened, according to the Nitro book. On Saturday, October 2nd, Russo boarded a 10 a.m. flight for Atlanta, Georgia. His plans for a defection, a closely guarded secret. During the afternoon, he traveled to a Marriott hotel to meet with a contingent of WCW representatives, including J.J. Dillon, Bill Bush, and Gary Juster, the company's vice president of arenas and merchandise. Throughout the day, and as reported by Dillon in his autobiography, quote, Russo did a great job selling himself to Bill Bush. He told Bill he had been writing the shows for the WWF, not Vince McMahon. He also claimed that McMahon would have a cursory glance of the scripts and then sign off on them. So the Russo era has begun here in WCW. Is this the first time you've watched Halloween Havoc 99? I can't imagine you sat down and watched this at the time.
No, this is. I was so tempted to sit down and watch it before we recorded this podcast, just to get familiar with what we're going to be talking about. But I looked over the notes. Derek Sabato did a great job on the notes and the research. And I thought, I love seeing these things for the very first time because my reactions to them are real and authentic. And this is the very first time I've seen this.
This is going to be a fun match to get us going here. It gets a star and a quarter in the Observer. They go 7 minutes and 35 seconds. Meltzer would say LaRue has shown a lot of potential, but these two simply did not work well together. It is a different time in WCW, where things are evolving, especially that cruiserweight division, like we touched on. We're doing much more character here instead of more bell to bell. Let's talk about what you're doing at this time, though. I know you're home, you're not working on wrestling. Are you still getting paid like on a weekly basis? I mean, I know they were paying you through your contract, but what did that look like as far as the way you received income or continued to receive payment from Turner?
Every 2 weeks, I'd get a check in the mail. Just right as rain, on time. I had 2.5 years left of my contract when Schiller sent me home. So I was in no hurry to do much of anything. I was probably still in Wyoming fishing when this took place. So I was in no hurry. I had no need to really go out and try to figure out what I was going to do for my life because I had a little bit of time to figure it out.
Well, somebody else who's had a little bit of time to figure it out as we're watching a pretty fun match here with Lash LaRue. And boy, Lash did not get all of that one. That couldn't have felt good. I wanted to ask you about a recent debut we saw on the AEW side of things. I don't think a lot of people would have necessarily called this, but it happened. Ric Flair came out on AEW Dynamite this past Wednesday night, and he was Tony Khan's quote unquote gift to Sting. Flair made the announcement that he wants to ride this wave with Sting, and he's going to hang in there until the final chapter closes for Sting, which Sting has announced, and we've discussed here in earlier episodes on the show. He's going to be retiring at what is historically like their March pay-per-view, Revolution. I don't think as of yet they've pinned down a host city. I think my understanding is they've got it narrowed down, and I'm interested to see what you think of the introduction of Ric Flair to AEW programming.
I like the fact that it was a surprise and it wasn't promoted, and I know the ratings probably weren't what anybody in AEW was hoping for. They got shellacked pretty good this past Wednesday night. But again, Rick wasn't advertised, so I love the way they brought him out. I think we're going to see the impact of Ric Flair's involvement, association with Sting on next week's ratings, since he was a surprise last week. But we'll see. I loved it. I think I talked about, somebody asked me, it was either on this podcast or a different one or whatever. Somebody said, who'd you like to see Sting wrestle for his last match? And I said, I want to make clear that everybody hears this, that although I doubt sincerely it would or could ever happen, I would love, just because of history and legacy and nostalgia, whatever, I'd love to see it be Ric Flair. And lo and behold, now Rick is introduced and he's partnering with Sting or going to be there, I assume, in his corner and quote unquote be on that ride with him. I didn't really understand the level of heat that Christian put on Rick. I mean, he really buried Rick, which is fine if there's a comeback. If Rick's going to get a chance to actually get a little physical and have some fun in the ring, then I guess it can make sense because it would, creatively speaking, motivate Rick and kind of push him to do something that he might not otherwise be interested in doing. So I hope it goes that way. I'm not going to be too critical of anything until we see how it plays out. But overall, thrilled to see Rick standing there next to Sting. I don't know how you couldn't be if you've been following Sting's career and Rick's career. And Ric Flair was the guy that put Sting on the map. That's the full circle kind of vibe that I'd love to see play out in a great way that also, pays homage a little bit here to Rick's career as well, as opposed to just coming out and burying him the way Christian did. Again, if there's a good comeback, no issue with it whatsoever. If there's no comeback for Rick, not sure it was the best use of someone like Ric Flair. What did you think about it? What did you think about it?
I thought Rick more than held his own. You know, I was really happy to see him there. I know that it means a lot to him and Sting to have this opportunity, and the nostalgia feeling of seeing, you know, Ric Flair, Sting, and Tony Schiavone together on TNT was a little crazy, a little fun. I enjoyed it. I was happy to say that it happened and to see it happen.
Have you talked to Rick? Did you find out how Rick felt about it?
Oh yeah. I've been talking to Rick before and after, and I'm excited to see where it goes next. So yeah, it's going to be a cool little wrinkle to the story. And, you know, as a fan, I'm wondering, you know, Rick's just doing this so he can turn on Sting one last time, right?
Oh, you think?
So there's Disco winning with a blockbuster in the opening match against Lash LaRue. And I think we've actually got somebody who wants to jump on and ask a question about this cruiserweight division. Welcome into the show from adfreeshows.com, Mr. Aaron Sheen. Aaron, welcome to the program. What's your question for Easy E today?
Hey, Eric, I was wondering, did you feel like the cruiserweight division was dead at this point, or?
I have to be honest with you, man. I wasn't watching enough of it to form a strong opinion. I can tell you that subsequently, it looked to me like the cruiserweight division was kind of losing its identity a little bit. But that's just me. You know, I was really focused on keeping it a cruiserweight division and not having guys like Disco, for example, or even Lash, who typically would wrestle outside of the cruiserweight division. I think when you do too much of that, the cruiserweight division loses its character to a degree, and certainly that happened later on. It was an issue that I had with TNA as well, with their X division, which was just another name for the cruiserweight division initially. But you'd have guys that weighed, 275 pounds in the X division, and that was one of my big bitches in TNA is, the X division has to feel unique, and the cruiserweight division had to feel unique in order for it to be something special. And when you had talent crossing over between the regular roster and the cruiserweight division, it lost some of that identity in my opinion. And certainly we're seeing a lot of that during this period of time and subsequent to this period.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, man.
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, Aaron, for your question. And of course, we're finished with match one now. We're back at the desk with Tony Schiavone and Bobby the Brain Heenan. And I think we should throw a little pause in here. Eric, when I get to the 16-minute mark, I'm going to hit the pause button. There it is. We're going to take this time out to talk about our friends at Embrace Pet Insurance. This podcast is proudly sponsored by Embrace Pet Insurance. And I say proudly because if you know one thing about Eric Bischoff is that he loves his dog, Nikki. And you may not know that my wife has a couple of dogs that have captured my heart as well. Baby and Ginger are parts of our family. And this is an important subject because, well, my daughter Kansas recently lost her pet of 9 years unexpectedly. And it was a tough circumstance, a tough situation. And unfortunately, this is part of that conversation. It was very expensive. Embrace Pet Insurance could have really, really helped. And I want to encourage you to look at this. It's time to upgrade your pet insurance game. Whether you have a dog or a cat, Embrace Pet Insurance has customized plans for your exact needs. Vet costs, easy for me to say, year over year are up 33%. Seriously, from 2022 to 2023, veterinary care is more expensive to the tune of 33%. Now, with Embrace Pet Insurance, you don't have to worry about any of that, and you can visit any vet or emergency clinic. Not only that, if you have multiple pets like I do, they can even get you a 10% multi-pet discount. I also want to recommend that you check out their 24/7 helpline. They've got an optional wellness reward program. They're trying to help you prioritize preventative care. You see, they don't want you to ever need Embrace in the first place. But let me just read a testimonial that I think will bring some clarity to this. Embrace made such a tremendous difference in my life. I could make decisions for my dog without thinking about my own needs. I could give him whatever the vet suggested he needed, thinking only of how to best help him. Every part of this process was easy, from getting a pre-existing condition screening to making claims to being reimbursed. And every person I spoke to at Embrace was compassionate and professional. My advice is to get coverage early and get it from Embrace. It wasn't just a good financial decision for us, but the most humane and caring one. And let me just be honest. I know some of you are probably thinking, man, I don't know. Do I really need Embrace pet insurance? Do I really need pet insurance? Well, let me ask you this. Do you want to be faced with that option of a very costly procedure that maybe you have to weigh out your own needs against your dog's needs? That's what we're talking about. Don't put yourself in that circumstance. You won't regret it. And don't wait for the unexpected to happen. Join the massive community of pet owners who trust Embrace Pet Insurance to protect their pet. Head to embracepetinsurance.com/83weeks and sign up for pet insurance today. Make sure you go to embracepetinsurance.com/83weeks, or else they won't know that I sent you. That's embracepetinsurance.com/83weeks. And we've got the game rolling here. We're at 16 minutes on the nose. We're stuck on a shot of Tony Schiavone and Bobby the Brain Heenan at the desk. I'll count us back in and track it here in 3, 2, 1, play.
Building, Brain. It's really eye-opening. Well, then let's see it and quit talking about it. That's what I want to do. I hate a guy who just talks and talks and talks and doesn't say nothing.
Earlier today,
Hey, Chris, where the hell have you guys been? Shane, I've paged you, we've called you. I know you've been in Japan, but you can't call us back. Tonight's a big night for the revolution, man. You know, Perry, you're right. Me and Chris did have a week to think about it. As far as we're concerned, you can take the revolution and stick it up your ass.
Ooh, we're saying ass now.
I think that makes it pretty official. The revolution is split. They're divided. If there was any doubt in anybody's mind, now for sure, Malenko and Benoit on one side, Shane Douglas and Perry Saturn on the other.
So there you go. That was Perry Saturn approaching Chris Benoit and Dean Malenko backstage. It said earlier today, but we're certainly trying to program this more like a television show. Here's Mike Tenay with Booker T and Stevie Ray. Let's track it.
To survive a Falls Count Anywhere, anything goes match with both the First Family as well as the Filthy Animals.
You know, Mike, survival ain't nothing new to me and my brother. See, we grew up on the street whooping punk asses like the First Family, you know, and the Filthy Animals each and every day of our lives. So tonight, it's going to be just like old school. It's going to be just like old times. And see, it won't be long till we get the titles back around our waist. Now, can you dig that, man?
I can relate to that.
You know, both of these teams, Filthy Animals, Brian Knobs, Hugh Morris, that rat Jimmy Hart, they found their place in the wrong place at the wrong time. This is Harlem Heat's night. And we're going to take those Filthy Animals that stole our belt, and we're going to put them out there miserable, if you know what I'm talking about. That will be the extermination of them. Tonight is Harlem Heat's night. And don't you forget it. I don't want them fat fruit booters to forget it, and them filthy, rotten, egg-sucking animals, they better not forget it. Now, can you dig that?
So the idea here is Rey Mysterio is injured. We're going to hold those tag titles up, and they're going to be decided in a three-way here. Harlem Heat will be in there against Conan and Billy Kidman and against Brian Knobs and Hugh Morris. They go 5 minutes and 2 seconds. Meltzer would say it was a decent brawl, but too short with a WWF style finish. And of course, they're flip-flopping these titles around quite a bit. You know, so we've stripped Rey Mysterio because he can't defend it. They're vacant. Harlem Heat's going to win the tag titles tonight and lose them tomorrow night. I know that Russo has come out and said something that a lot of fans get pretty excited about, but I've heard a lot of other people say it. What do you take about Russo's stance that, quote unquote, the belt's a prop?
I mean, it's a tool, right? It's a tool that one uses as stakes. So in the sense that the belt is what everybody should be striving for and is inherently the stakes in just about any storyline, one could argue that technically he would be right. But to diminish the value of the title as it relates to how important it is for stakes and how important it is that the stakes matter, therefore how important it is that the titles matter, which is really the issue that I think most people have with that comment. And I think it was really a reflection of Russo's feelings that, you know, belts are just belts, and yes, you can switch them back and forth and it doesn't really matter. That's what I think people take exception to. And I think that's flawed thinking at the very least.
Well, here come the Harlem Heat. Certainly, this is not the Harlem Heat that we grew up with. Their look is a little different. Their style is a little different. And Booker T is about to be firmly on his way to the world title. Of course, at this point, he's ventured out and had some single success, but I like putting them back together in a more traditional tag team. Of course, we know that Hugh Morris is teaming with Brian Knobbs. There is no Jerry Sags involved. Man, is it just me or did the video just jump right to like a mid match?
Yeah. What the hell was that?
Man, what a weird little edit that was that we discovered on Peacock. You know, something else that people discovered over the weekend that you and I haven't talked about was the documentary that they did a few years ago that is finally off the shelf, talking about the WWE superfan Vladimir. Did you ever have the opportunity to meet Vladimir before?
I don't think I have. If I did, unfortunately don't remember, but I'm pretty sure I have not. And I've heard a lot of good things about that documentary. I'm going to definitely check it out because some people that I really respect really, really put it over.
It's called Superfan. Okay, so that was a video that was, I guess, getting us ready for what we were doing. But man, there should have been an on-screen graphic there to sort of tease that and promote it.
Yeah, that was confusing.
Here comes Conan and Kidman, and Conan is looking cooler than the other side of the pillow. And here comes Kidman with a home camera, and you can only hope that he made a lot of other movies in that era as
well. You dirty bastard.
Well, I don't know. I mean, you were in the films. You like to, I mean, I saw like Buff Bagwell had a movie, Hulk Hogan had some movies. Maybe he was looking to get in on that game. I don't know.
Well, fortunately, if he did, those videos remain locked under key, which is the classy thing to do.
I would agree. Let's do a few.
Classy dude, by the way. Very, very classy guy. Enjoying a tremendous career in WWE.
Josh Williams wants to know who came up with the Halloween Havoc logo. Any chance you remember that? I mean, I guess that sort of predates you even. I mean, they had one in '89.
Yeah, I would know. It had been modified over the years a little bit, but any of the branding for pay-per-views generally came out of the office of Sharon Sadello, or Mike Weber was involved, I'm sure, but I wasn't involved in it.
Do you think if WCW would have continued, I know that you've sort of contended that, in your opinion, Halloween Havoc was the big super show and not Starrcade. And I can't argue that because they certainly feel big. I think the only thing I would always come back to was like the Hogan Sting thing. That maybe could have been blown off at your version of WrestleMania. Perhaps it should have happened at Halloween Havoc rather than Starrcade. But if WCW would have persisted and they wouldn't have gone under, do you think eventually people could have talked about Halloween Havoc in the same vein they would at WrestleMania? Like, you got to have your sort of WrestleMania moment, your Halloween Havoc moment, that sort of thing.
I think it definitely would have been a tentpole for us. I liked Halloween Havoc also because it was in October and not December. December, there's so much going on. You've got the Christmas holidays. You got people spending money on Christmas, a lot of travel going on. It's not the best time of the year to do a pay-per-view. Whereas October, although you're affected by Monday Night Football ratings and your TV ratings take a little bit of a hit. Overall, I thought that October was a much better tentpole because of the timing, because of the nature of it being Halloween Havoc and the fun that you could have, playing off of it. If I would have been involved with WCW long term, if the Fusion Media deal would have gone down the way we hoped it would, Halloween Havoc would have been the biggest pay-per-view for WCW for all the right reasons.
What'd you think of a big clusterfuck like this for a tag team match? It's a garbage match. It's a brawl. We're not working tags. It's just 6 guys running around with weapons in the ring all together.
You know how I feel about that. It's just too hard for the audience to, look at the audience. They're just sitting there. They don't even know what to get excited about because there's so much going on in the ring and none of it really makes sense. It's just, as you said, a cluster for the sake of a cluster. Not really digging it. Never have, never will.
RCS88 wants to know, where do you rank Great American Bash? Like, if Halloween Havoc's number 1, is Starcade 2 and Bash 3, or?
Yeah, I think that would be fair. No doubt about it. I mean, they're the branded pay-per-views that have been around the longest. So I think by default, they would rank for me in that order for sure.
We should remind everybody that Russo has been with the company now for just under 3 weeks. So this is officially his first pay-per-view. That big meeting happens on October 2nd. And it's written in the Nitro book. Before Russo could fly back to Connecticut, the party tendered its offer. The position of creative director, a role purportedly promising full control over WCW programming as part of a 3-year deal effective immediately. In terms of compensation, a generous base salary was offered, augmented by bonuses for achieving targets related to the ratings and pay-per-view buy rates. In response, a weary Russo, sensing creative fatigue to be imminent, pushed for the pact to expire a year earlier. I knew at that point I was already burned out on the wrestling business, he says. I was looking to give WCW my all for 2 years and then walk away from the business. He said that in 1999, that was his plan in 1999, 2 more years, and then I'm done. Of course, we know that wound up not being actually the case.
Did he even make it a full 2 years? Didn't he
No.
pack up his bags and go home and pout? And yeah, he had a pattern of doing that. It happened a couple times in TNA that I was aware of. Anytime you put any pressure on a guy like Vince Russo, he collapses like a house of cards. And he did it a couple of times, I think, during his first run at WCW.
So we've got the guys brawling in the backstage area here. You see Booker T and Brian Knobbs. Meanwhile, in the ring, Jimmy Hart is helping Hugh Morris set up a table, and they're putting his former Dungeon of Doom stablemate, easy for me to say, Conan on it.
Let's go. Up, top, here we go. No laughing matter. And it splits down. He hit him with a mummy.
His mummy's there.
Number 1, 2, 3. We got a pin here.
So we saw Hugh Morris do a moonsault off the top rope through the table that Conan was laying on with Conan on it. But instead, that's not the pin. In the backstage area where no one could see, referee Slick Johnson counted 3 as Stevie Ray pinned Brian Knobbs. And they've just missed this big moment in the ring, whatever the hell Kidman just did.
Isn't that weird?
Absolute chaos,
weird.
production snafu. I don't even know how to describe what we're looking at here, but it's a mess.
It really is. And I think, again, that goes to, Vince Russo had this vision for a crash TV style where things are happening all over the place and very, very quickly. And it's a mess. It really is a mess.
So Billy Silverman was thinking that, Billy Kidman was counting the pinfall here when, in fact, Slick Johnson was backstage counting the pinfall on Stevie Ray. So it's a convoluted mess. We're going to get a rematch. We're going to get a follow-up. But next up, I think we've got DDP and Kimberly coming out to do an interview because we've got Flair and Paige going to be working together here pretty soon. It's interesting to watch wrestling in 1999 because, as hot on the product as I was in 1997 and certainly 98, my enthusiasm for wrestling was starting to really peter out in 1999. Like I can remember like 99 and 2000, 2001, for whatever reason, those years were not as big in my fandom. And I don't know if it's because things had changed so quickly with both WCW and ECW, because by this point, ECW is on TNN. They started back in August of 99, and it was just not the same as the late night syndicated show. So many of the talent were gone, and I don't know, it just didn't feel the same. And neither does the WCW presentation. Like once upon a time, Halloween Havoc would have been can't miss for me. I don't even recall if we got this pay-per-view.
Do you think that has to do with the product itself at that time? Or do you think that maybe you were aging out of the demo a little bit and beginning to start your own business and just?
No, I mean, at this point, I'm still going to college. I'm still working in sales, but no, I would still classify and call myself a wrestling fan. I just don't think creatively, we're not hitting on all cylinders here. Like what made me such a big Nitro fan was the cruiserweights and specifically the NWO. And we don't really have the NWO the way we used to. I mean, we're going to have red and yellow Hulk Hogan here. So it's just a little different. I don't know. It's not as fun for me.
I get it. Wasn't as fun for me either.
No doubt. It's crazy how quickly that changes too, though. But I find myself with the current product like that. Like I sort of fell out of watching for quite a while the WWE program and then got back with it, and it's been fantastic. Speaking of fantastic, what a fun spot that was. The Mummy getting slammed down on Brian Knobbs and the referee just flipping out. Oh, I was wrong. It was Booker T who made the cover. It was Stevie Ray who did the Mummy spot. Whatever.
I wonder if that was a nod to Ron Reese.
That Mummy, yeah, maybe. Let's track it here. We see Ric Flair strutting ass in to the building.
Ric Flair and David Flair walking in. What's that in his hand?
That's a crowbar.
Is that what that is?
Yeah, he isn't out there stealing tires off cars, I'll
He
tell you.
is an angry man. And I can tell you what, as we go back, what's this about here? Well, we were going back to the ring for Diamond Dallas Page's music, and it's not on my format for DDP to come out here, but I guess that's what's happening with his music.
Well, let's just hold on and see. There could have been a change in the match. You never know.
Flair stalks in like a man possessed, and Diamond Dallas Page and Kimberly come to the ring.
Notice what DDP's wearing here. Meltzer would note that he's wearing an expensive shirt and doing gestures like The Rock, talking about Flair liking to spank it, whack it, and jack it. Standards and practices must have had a lot of fun with that. So let's take a look and see what we think of Meltzer's criticism or critique of DDP here in his expensive shirt. And is he doing a Rock impression? We'll see.
Times 14 times. Ric Flair, you and I both know what I'm talking about, and it's not the number of times that you won that stupid belt. 14 is the number of times that you took your hand and smacked it on my butt.
It's 7 with each hand.
Yes.
But
You're on couldn't.
I got a little news for you, Rick. You see, when Paige and I are together, intimately speaking, that is, I consider a 14 times spanking just a little warm up.
Definitely a Russo line right there.
When Paige does it, it's a good thing. But when you do it, it's a bad thing.
You see, Nature Boy, I love her. I hate you. After tonight, you're never gonna forget me. Now let me get this straight. Kimberly invites David Flair up to her room. An obvious swerve. Davey Boy has Nature Boy fill his shoes. I can't possibly suck. I'm not from Las Vegas. If there's anybody that lives like here. I was saying, over here, Davey Boy has Nature Boy fill his shoes. Either way, a boy is sent to do a man's job. Look at the facts. Nature Boy, you're in a hotel room with this, and all you can think about is spanking it.
Well, there's a line there somewhere.
One time, not two times, but 14 times. You run your hand over this. You like to spank it, don't you, Nature Boy? Of course you do. Well, DDP's got you spanked right here. You want to spank it, Nature Boy? Let's whack it. Let's jack it all night long.
Blue Chew spot.
Top match. Me and you. You want the truth, Nature Boy? You can't handle the truth. The truth is, I want you to take this strap if you get the shot, and I want you to whack it all night long.
Jeez.
Bet your ass I'm gonna be whacking you. And that's a promise from the new king of Bada Bing, Bada Boom, Bada Bang.
Mercifully, it's over. We're going to stop it at 36:50. I'm going to hit pause at 36 minutes and 50 seconds, and hopefully you will too. Boy, it felt like right there that somebody, before they wrote that down, they had to be drinking a little bit, and I can only hope they had a time machine and they had some Z-Biotics, because they woke up with a Halloween Havoc nightmare. I mean, you want to talk about feeling rough the next day. Yeah, we're all feeling a little rough after that one. And I want to give you a pro tip. Next time you're going to have friends and family over, you're going to get a little get together. Maybe you missed your chance for Halloween. Do it in time for Thanksgiving and Christmas. I'm talking about Z-Biotics. You see, as we get older, we start to realize we got to make a deal. We want to have fun tonight, or do we want to be productive tomorrow? Well, with Z-Biotics, you don't have to make that compromise. Here's how it works. Z-Biotics Pre-Alcohol Probiotics is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Z-Biotics produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. You see, it's designed to work like your liver, but in your gut where you need it most. So drink Z-Biotics before drinking, drink responsibly, and enjoy the night with confidence. Eric and I became true believers a few years ago at Podcast Movement. We knew we were going to have a few cocktails, so we tried a Z-Biotics and closed down the bars that night, boys and girls. But we were on stage, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed the next morning, all thanks to Z-Biotics. It really, really works, and I want you to savor the moment. Let Z-Biotics do the rest. Go right now to zbiotics.com/83weeks. You'll get 15% off your first order when you use 83 weeks at checkout. Z-Biotics is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember, head to zbiotics.com/83weeks and use the code 83weeks at checkout for 15% off. And we want to thank Z-Biotics for sponsoring this episode. Let's get back to our countdown. We're at 36 minutes and 50 seconds. We see DDP on the second rope looking out at the crowd. 36:50. Here we go. In 3, 2, 1, play.
Change so fast. This is going to be great.
Listen, they're trying to sell some tickets, I guess. I don't even know if that really counts, though, because this isn't a promo on TV to get to the pay-per-view. It's a promo during the pay-per-view about a match later in the same show. Maybe we're trying to firmly establish that he's a heel here, but I can't really understand why we did the promo here And I think it goes without saying the promo was, well, less than ideal, maybe. What'd you think?
I thought it just sucked. I mean, it just reeked of Vince Russo. The overt kind of sexual double entendres, and it was poorly done. I get the feeling listening to that Paige wasn't too excited about it, but
Yeah.
the relationship was new with Russo, and Paige is a team player, but that was so uncomfortable. And look, Kimberly was great on camera for a lot of things, but cutting a promo wasn't one of them. I don't mean to be critical of her. She was doing her best, but she just didn't have the experience on the mic, and it felt very unnatural. You put someone like Kimberly in a situation where she's not really that comfortable on the mic anyway, and now she's cutting a promo talking about how many times Ric Flair, grabbed her ass, and Paige is in there talking about jacking it and whacking it. It was just so childish and incoherent in many ways. That was god awful. Paige, I'm sorry. You're a good friend. I love you to death, but that promo just sucked.
We got a fun promo backstage right there with Eddie Guerrero and Mike Tenay. He was also briefly joined by Tori Wilson and Billy Kidman. And you saw Eddie was sporting a Rolex there. That is Ric Flair's Rolex that he stole from Nitro. And what a treat we've got here. Eddie Guerrero is going to be taking on Perry Saturn. Saturn's going to come out first. But when you see Eddie come out, he's going to be rocking that Flair Rolex, and he'll give it to Bobby Heenan ringside. 11 minutes and 12 seconds. What a cool look this is, man. I love that giant pumpkin. I think that thing wound up in a storage building auction or something like that. About a year ago, I saw somebody had found it and inflated it in their front yard. And I was like, man, you want to talk about owning the neighborhood with Halloween decorations. That's the way to do it.
I can't believe you didn't reach it. Where are we at time code wise?
36, 39, 26, 27, 28, 29, 39, 30.
All right. Appreciate that. I'm surprised, Conrad, you didn't reach out and try to buy that pumpkin.
I don't know what I would do with it if I had it, but
put it up in front of your house, up on the mountain. You'd own the mountain. People could see it from miles away. It'd be like the Sphere when you fly over it. Everybody would look down and say, look at that pumpkin in Conrad's yard.
Here's what we'll do. When we hang up, why don't you call Megan and see if you can work it out? What a fun set, though. Here comes Eddie Guerrero. And man, I love he's got wrist tape with a Rolex around it. I don't know why it tickles me, but it does. Let's do a question here. We got a great question from watching as part of our live chat. I want to thank everybody for showing up and hanging out with us here on a Sunday. I know Alex is here, and I know Denovius is here, and of course we know Aaron's here. How about Mouthpiece Murphy also chiming in? I appreciate all you guys hanging out with us. See a couple of Michaels hanging out with us. Thanks everybody for there's Bobby, Bryant, the whole gang's here, man. Appreciate you guys coming and hanging out. You could be a part of our live studio audience over at adfreeshows.com, but we got a handful of fun questions as we see Eddie admiring that watch as he makes his way around the ring. Aaron wants to know, what are Eric's thoughts on TNA coming back? A good idea, or should it be left in the past? Of course, this is a topic because last weekend, as we're recording this, it was announced at the Bound for Glory pay-per-view that Impact Wrestling is going back to their old name. TNA is back. What'd you make of that announcement, Eric?
It's interesting. Time will tell whether it really makes any difference or not. I suspect it won't. It's not like the TNA brand had a substantial following and a loyal fan base. And, it was an emerging company from the get-go. But we'll see. I hated the TNA thing because it was a Vince Russo play on tits and ass, and it just started out tacky. And although they tried to cover their ass by calling it total nonstop action, the idea of it being TNA was pretty well cemented when you had the girls dancing in cages at ringside and all that kind of crazy shit. So I don't know that it was that strong of a brand ever to begin with. And therefore, I don't think it retained much equity, if any. So I think there'll be some interest in it. It's already created a buzz, right? People are already talking about it, and we'll see if it has any impact overall on the growth or the future of the company. I don't think it will, but I could be wrong.
Flair's going to make his way out here eventually, and we're going to see some singing or not singing, but some dancing and some kissing for him and Tori Wilson. And I guess she's going to like it. But all of these things are now going to start to be more and more a part of the famed standards and practices. Russo had this to say in the Nitro book: I knew I was going to have to deal with standards and practices, but I was cool with that. Moreover, upon his recommendation, WCW agreed to offer his writing partner, also working without a contract from McMahon, a 2-year agreement of his own. Quote, I pitched Ed Ferrara in my first meeting with him. He was never originally part of the deal, divulges Russo, whose decision to support his collaborator paid immediate dividends. After reading the fine print, Ferrara insisted on a pay or play clause for the twosome, meaning that regardless of the circumstances, WCW would be obligated to pay the entire amount promised on each deal. When asked to elaborate on the eventual terms, Russo responds, I don't think discussing my salary is anybody's business but my own. I will say this, I wouldn't have signed a 2-year contract with WCW for less than $1 million over that time. Now, he's talked about what he actually got paid in his own book before, but standards and practices comes up quite a bit, and it's mentioned there by Russo. And our old pal Bryant in our group chat, our live chat, wants to know, it was said standards and practices would be in the creative meetings for Nitro. Will they have had any say during pay-per-view shows since they're not on their network?
Probably not. You know, the idea with the pay-per-views were that you could get away with things and do things that were not necessarily copacetic for television. So I doubt, at least in my experience, when I had, my experience with standards and practices, a lady by the name of Terry Tingle. Now that's a stripper name.
Yes.
Terry Tingle. Wow. But my initial, work with her, she was more focused on the television product, and nobody was really too concerned with what was going on pay-per-view. At least not to the extent that they were on television.
What was your experience with standards and practices? Like, can you think of any really egregious, silly things that they threw the flag on?
Lots. Well, maybe not a lot, because it happened a while ago, but there were a couple, my initial meeting with Terry Tingle, I didn't even, keep in mind, I had worked for WCW for 6 or 7 years and had never heard of anything called standards and practices in Turner Broadcasting. Standards and practices never had any contact with WCW all the time I was there, either as a talent or executive producer or vice president, senior vice president, president, whatever. Up until the very end, I had never heard of standards and practices as being a part of Turner Broadcasting. Somehow, somebody decided that it was going to be important to introduce me to Terry Tingle. It happened at that big meeting when I've told you about before, when I got invited down to Techwood, the area where all the top Turner executives worked. And I walked into this room and there were 15, 16 people sitting around a table that I didn't even know. And Terry Tingle was one of them. And she was introduced to me as the head of standards and practices. And the first meeting was just kind of acknowledging each other and me becoming aware that she even existed. But shortly thereafter, I got an email or a phone call from her, one way or the other. And I was advised that going forward, that I was going to have to supply scripts to Terry Tingle like 30 days in advance. And my first thought was, we don't do scripts, we do formats. And I'm happy to supply a format to you, but those formats change throughout the week, sometimes day of, depending on a number of different variables that could occur. But I'm happy to supply them to you. And she wanted them she wanted television scripts 30 days in advance. And I had to tell her that we don't do television scripts. Most networks, all networks have standards and practices now. They have to. But television networks and executives in them are really familiar with looking at scripted entertainment, where scripts are written 6 months in advance, a year in advance in some cases. And yes, they do change and modify along the way. But I had to explain to her that this was kind of live action. This isn't Gone with the Wind, Terry. I can't give you a script that far in advance. It's just not possible. And if I give you a format, it's going to have some detail in it, obviously, but there are going to be things that are said in narrative that are not going to be a part of that script because it's live television. People are reacting to what's going on. And she couldn't understand that at all. And so we started butting heads right off the bat. But the one that really stands out to me is a note that I got back once we did give her a format. Is somebody was calling somebody stupid in a promo.
Oh,
And she flagged that. She says, you can't refer to someone as stupid because that's demeaning. I reacted as you might expect, got on the phone with her and said, do you understand the nature of professional wrestling? It's kind of part of the narrative and part of the product that people degrade each other. I mean, it was mind-boggling to me, but it was also a window into, what was about to come.
that's just crazy when you really think about it. That
Yeah.
you couldn't say stupid. My goodness.
Well, I mean, and that's what happens when you get television networks and executives in them who have no understanding at all of the wrestling business. None. They have no experience in it. They don't watch it. They don't follow it. They don't know its history. They don't know why it works. They don't understand the audience. They're alien to the property. But then you've got an executive who knows nothing about the product or its audience or its history, making decisions creatively over what is said or what is done on the show. So it's an untenable situation. Let's put it that way.
We would hear Russo talk about standards and practices quite a bit, but he'd also talk about politics. And we know his frustration with Hulk Hogan would bubble and boil over. Denovia Smack, who's watching along with us from adfreeshows.com, has a great question here. Do you think Russo tried to bring the same mentality he had in the WWF to WCW, and that's why it didn't work? Meaning he had way more seasoned vets in WCW that didn't want to budge. Do you think that was, and I know that would be easy for you to sort of dissect, but I want to make it a football example. I think most people listening to this would agree, no matter what your football bias is, Nick Saban is one of the greatest college football coaches of all time. I'm not saying but he's certainly in the conversation. Now, in the NFL, boy, it did not work. And a lot of people at the time were critical of his coaching style in the NFL and said, he doesn't know how to talk to young millionaires. He's used to screaming at kids right out of high school, but a 20-something-year-old millionaire, he's not going to respond the same way. I'm curious if you think perhaps just the structure or the approach that he thought he could just apply the same way. That's a fair question from Denovius Mac. What do you think?
Yeah, thank you, Genovius. I appreciate the question, but I think in Russo's case, it wasn't really the difference in the talent and what they were willing to accept and not accept. I think it had a lot more to do with talent, especially seasoned talent, people that have been around the block for a few minutes, probably recognized very, very early on that Russo was an empty suit and that he didn't really know what he was doing. Therefore, they weren't really willing to accept the kind of things that Russo wanted to do. Some of them did because some of them just wanted to keep their job. They just wanted to keep that paycheck coming in every month. Some of them probably wanted to, give Russo some time and allow him to get comfortable and the talent get to know Russo. That's fine too. You're a professional. That's what you should do. But I think there were probably a number of talents that listened to Russo just like I did when I first started working with him and realizing that this guy is a fraud. There is nothing under the hood. When it came to his original ideas, he just didn't really understand the product, despite the fact that he claimed that he wrote all WWE shows and Vince just took a look at it and cursory look and just signed off on it. I don't believe that shit at all. I wasn't there, admittedly, so I can't say 100%, but I have never heard of Vince McMahon having a hands-off approach to his product. In fact, it's quite the opposite. And I just don't see, especially at that time, just keep in mind, WCW had been kicking WWE's ass for quite some time until the latter part of 98, 99. I just don't buy the fact that, Vince McMahon was hands off. I think there was a lot of reconstructive surgery done to some of Russo's ideas and plans. So I don't know. It just depends on what you want to believe. But I think more than anything, it was just the talent seeing through Vince's bullshit.
Let's not talk about bullshit. Let's talk about the ratings. I mean, that's what this was all about. That's what this company wanted. They are a television company. They're after those ratings. So let's run through some of the ratings. September 6th, which is your last show, did a 4.1. It ran unopposed. Raw would start at 11 p.m. Eastern due to the U.S. Open. So the next week on September 13th, 3 days after you're sent home, 1 day after Fall Brawl, a 3.3. A week later, 3.1. On the 27th, a 3.0. The back and forth with Russo was on October 2nd. October 4th is a 2.9. October 11th is a 2.6. And Russo's first official Nitro was October 18th, just a handful of days before this pay-per-view. It did a 3.3. The difference at the time, Eric, between a 2.6 and a 3.3, what would you guess that would be?
Oh, I have to break out the calculator, but if a ratings point was worth roughly 1 million homes, and it was, I think the average was 1.5 people per home. So you just take about 700,000 viewers, I guess would be a guess.
We're watching alongside here, and we see Ric Flair just planted a big one on Tori Wilson. She seems to like it. He's dancing around, and she's wondering, hey, what do I do next? Double down with the two guys, but I think he got the kiss and he got the Rolex, so he's in good shape. Let's talk about the first ever Nitro under the Russo era, though. Meltzer had this to say: the new era of WCW TV began October 18th in Philadelphia with Russo and Ed Ferrara's first Nitro. This was no mistaking the fingerprints, even if viewers didn't have that fact drummed into their head early in the show. Far more detailed work was done in scripting this show than any Nitro in recent memory and possibly ever. Time will tell, but after the first show, my feeling was that when Nitro was in its heyday with the good undercard wrestling climaxing with the star power matches on top, it was a far better 3-hour show than this was. However, this was better than the majority, if not all, of the recent Nitro shows. The throwing so many angles at people burns out the audience faster than wrestling matches do, and by late in the show, the crowd reactions were similar to Raw in that the crowd was dead for the wrestling. The show was very entertaining for the first hour and entertaining still for the second hour, but by the third hour, even though there was nothing wrong with the show, it was evident this style of booking doesn't translate well into a 3-hour format. Fortunately, it appears most likely a certainty that Nitro will be cut back to 2 hours in January. So some criticism of the first Russo Nitro, saying that, boy, it's a lot. Maybe it doesn't work well with a 3-hour show, but as we've said pretty often here, 3 hours is a lot for any wrestling show, is it not?
Indeed it is, but it also provides a unique opportunity to thread your stories, meaning you can start a story or advance a story in most cases in the first 30 minutes or so of a show. If it's a main event story, perhaps right off the bat, you can kind of set the hook or bait the hook, so to speak. You can follow it up later on, maybe in the second hour, and set the hook in the second hour, and then of course deliver the match and reel it in during the main event. And that's an opportunity that exists in a 3-hour format. Not everybody takes advantage of it, unfortunately. I'd like to see stories kind of thread throughout the show and build and escalate and kind of build on the anticipation and deliver in the main event. Don't really see that too often anymore. We used to see it all the time, but it doesn't happen as often anymore. It happens more in WWE, obviously, than some of the AEW shows I've seen, at least some of the earlier ones. But yeah, 3 hours is a grind. It's hard to hold the audience's attention no matter what you do. But I think the Crash TV concept of just throwing so much stuff at the audience so quickly, really, you talk about audience fatigue. That'll do it, because it's too hard to pay attention to. And you don't know what to pay attention to. I think that's the bigger issue.
So we saw backstage earlier in the show, we did a cutaway and we saw Goldberg arriving to the arena. We just saw one and he was on top of someone pounding away. It turns out it was Sid Vicious. When Sid stood up, he was covered in blood. Shivani tries to reset and is shocked to hear Buff Bagwell's music, Buff makes his way into the ring, and well, you got to listen to this.
Happened to tune in last Monday night. You see that Buff Daddy's got a little problem with the two new riders, the two new sheriffs from up north that are going to save WCW. Well, not only do I got a problem with the two new riders, I got a problem with Jeff Jarrett swinging a guitar at my head. So let me tell you something, Jarrett. If you bring that camera right in these eyes, you want to talk about stroke? Stroke is showing up in Las Vegas, Nevada, and being off the show and just making it happen because I'm buff and I'm the stuff. So with that said, big man, if you'll just bring your hillbilly Tennessee ass out here, I'm going to shove this foot right up it.
You can do it.
Heated. Get on the set and send him out here. Play his music, whatever.
Tony, get it done. Get him out here now. Say no more. With guitar in hand, Jeff Jarrett has come out. And Buff Bagwell runs over it twice.
Well, Jarrett never refuses a good fight either.
The fight is taking place on the outside. Not a part of Halloween Havoc. Completely unannounced. Impromptu wild brawl that we have here.
Well, that's how Jarrett showed up last week. No one knew he was even in the building.
So they're going to have a bit of a brawl here, Eric, and Lex Luger's going to come join them. As a reminder, Lex Luger is going to be upset with Jeff Jarrett for knocking out Elizabeth backstage at Nitro, because that's just fresh happened on TV. Jarrett hit Elizabeth just like Jarrett had been hitting ladies on the WWE show. Now he hit Miss Elizabeth with the guitar. I know we're going to have to break down what we just heard here, but Bagwell talking about the riders, the sheriffs from up north here to save WCW. I mean, I know this is supposed to be inside baseball, but I don't know, dude. This feels like a miss to me. What do you think?
That's a giant miss, and I'm glad you brought it up. I was going to, but I, didn't want to come off as being bitter. But that was stupid, and that was an example of Russo and Ferrara trying to establish themselves really as characters. Otherwise, why would you talk about the writers in a show? Look, people know, right? I'm not suggesting that people don't know that there's writers. Not that at all. But you talk about taking people out of the product when you have talent in there talking about the writers was really just stupid. I no other way to say it. It was self-serving and stupid.
Yeah, it's I don't understand the upside or the point. But that would be, one of the first times we would see people start really talking about. Let's listen. So we were seeing Eddie Guerrero or Sid getting stitched up. Mike Tenay was doing a little commentary, and then Sid has had it with the doctor, stands up yelling, "Let it bleed, let it bleed." What a maniac he was. And we see Eddie Guerrero in the stairwell. We've got a Batman angle shot, so that looks like maybe Jackie Crockett shot it. And and he's on a flip phone. He's on a cell phone. This show feels unlike any Halloween Havoc in history. It's written just like a TV show, is it not?
Yeah, and again, that's a problem. Your pay-per-view should feel like a special event. It should be the culmination of your A story, perhaps. I say perhaps because you can continue that story in some cases, but all roads, meaning all television, should lead to the resolution of conflict or the advancement of conflict and story in a pay-per-view. It shouldn't feel like a free television show. It's just common sense. How can you expect people to spend $39, $49, $59, $69, $79 on a pay-per-view when it feels just like a television show that you watch for free? And you're not getting that resolution of conflict. You're getting the continuation of it. That's what television is for. That's not what pay-per-view is for. And I'm not saying that it should never happen. You can have a storyline where what appears to be a resolution only continues to advance into the next pay-per-view because of something that happened or because the stakes have changed. But to just produce a pay-per-view that has the feel and the lack of continuity that this does clearly, and make it feel just like another television show is, man, that's self-defeating.
Well, something you're going to enjoy because I know what high regard you hold him in. We see Alex Wright or Berlin coming to the ring here. He's seconded by the Wall. By the way, when WWE was recently in Germany, he went to the show and posted a selfie of himself in the crowd, in the stands with the entrance set behind him. Cool to see Alex Wright up and around and doing his thing in 2023. But I was saying all that to say he's on his way here to wrestle Brad Armstrong, who's already in the ring. And this is actually going to be Brad Armstrong's last ever WCW pay-per-view. He would still stick around with the company a bit longer, but ultimately, this is his last pay-per-view. Man, you want to talk about a guy going way too soon. I don't know that anybody was more universally well-liked than Brad Armstrong.
And what an amazing talent. And I have to say, I'm guilty of not recognizing that talent when I had the opportunity and worked with Brad. But I think in today's environment, someone like Brad, or if Brad were still with us and still, physically capable, I think Brad Armstrong was an amazing talent. But I think he was ahead of his time a little bit. Brad had, the majority of his career kind of took place when the larger than life characters were where the money was, or at least that's what everybody thought. Brad was an amazing talent, ahead of his time. And I know a lot of people recognize that talent now, but at that time he was so underappreciated and underrated.
Super fun to know that we're watching his last pay-per-view match here and against a very capable performer. Go out of your way to watch this one, especially if you're a big Armstrong fan like we are. Just think the world of the whole family. He got a quarter star in the Observer. Meltzer would say it seemed like they were building a good match, but the finish came out of nowhere. The match had no heat. Let's talk about what we just saw with Buff Bagwell, because we heard what Buff said. He's referencing the writers and all that, but I want to add some context. A friend of mine is famous for saying context is king. And back on the very first episode of Nitro that Russo had put together, here's what Dave wrote about it. Bagwell did an interview first proclaiming himself as the new superstar based on all the various internet interviews that Vince Russo had done talking up that point. Again, it's clear they're booking with the idea that the entire wrestling audience is on the internet. Russo's name was brought up early in the show as they're trying to get over the idea that this is a new WCW. Plus, they need his name over for future angles on both shows and on the horizon. Bagwell then came out later in the show without his gimmick, wearing an I'm doing a job face, wrestling La Parka in a grudge match from Thursday, and doing nothing on offense and visibly showing he wasn't allowed to, making Parka look like an idiot, and then laying down for the pin, getting right up and saying something to the effect of, Russo, did I do the job right? They shot to backstage where the undercard wrestlers watching the monitor were popping, seeing the bigger star having to lay down for the underused foreigner who gets no respect. At this point, Jarrett ran in and clocked Bagwell with the guitar, with Jarrett saying he's actually the chosen one because he's closest with the guy who has the stroke. So we're so
God, does that suck or what?
It's not good, man.
And again, that's Russo's ego shining through. Russo from day one, when he walked into WCW, in my opinion, he wanted to get himself over. He wanted to be Vince McMahon. He wanted to be the character that Eric Bischoff was. I mean, it's so obvious to me now, right? It probably wasn't as obvious to people then, but if you right off the bat to establish yourself, the writer, as a character on the show, he was establishing himself as the authority figure. Absolutely sucked. And he was willing to sacrifice the quality of the show in order to do it. Look, I'm not against somebody trying to get, I'm not against authority figures. Hats off to Nick Aldis. I think Nick's going to do a fantastic job in SmackDown. But you've got to get the talent over. You've got to get the story over first. And if you happen to get over along the way, fantastic. But this was a case of sacrificing the quality of the product in order to get yourself over, because that's your fantasy play. It's so obvious, so obvious.
Yeah, it's not the best time to be a WCW fan. It's no wonder I wasn't watching at this point, right?
Yeah, I don't blame you, man. I wasn't watching either.
Yeah.
I was out here in Wyoming catching. I lived in Arizona at the time, but I was out here I still lived in Atlanta. Yeah, this is 99. I still lived in Atlanta. I was still out here catching fish. Fishing is awesome in October. Awesome.
Well, maybe the creative could have been a little more awesome. Meltzer would talk about this angle, saying the angle was done in this manner to create the idea that there's a booker who tells people to lose, since the original plan was something along the lines of Hogan versus Sting, with Hogan doing the same thing, trying to exercise his creative control and refusing to do the job for the match. Somehow Russo, or whomever will play the Vince McMahon role, will get his way at the end and Hogan will leave, only to come back later as an anti-authority babyface a la Steve Austin, or how Russo would have scripted a return of Bret Hart to the WWF had he had the chance. Now that's interesting, because this is written about in October of 99, well in advance of what we saw happen in July of 2000 at the Bash at the Beach. It almost feels as if this has been an idea, that storyline that we've talked about, Hogan refusing to do a job, and then he's going to come back as this anti-authority babyface. That was basically the framework of what was laid out in July of 2000, no?
But that wasn't Russo's idea. The idea of Hulk, getting frustrated and pissed off and taking the belt and leaving, that had nothing to do with Vince Russo. That was all something that I worked on with Hulk and we developed. I think it's just a coincidence at this point.
I just find that fascinating that, it was at least discussed here in the fall of 99. And then we know, July 2000, what's going to happen.
Well, I think if you watch the Dark Side of the Ring, I don't even remember what the title of the show was, but it was essentially a WCW show with Vince Russo talking about what went wrong at Bash at the Beach. And
Yes.
I mean, Vince Russo had an entirely different plan going into the Bash at the Beach, and he talked about it himself. And the fact that we wouldn't go along with it is what created that conflict.
How about Ric Flair here? Let's track him.
And only I can look the way I've looked for 27 years. The man, the 14-time world heavyweight champion, the dirtiest player in the game. Kidman, you and the filthy animals, you walked out of last Monday night thinking you were on, thinking you were ready to play in the big time. Tonight I walked back right here in Las Vegas. I took back my Rolex and I took back my legacy. You guys don't like it, I'll be here all night long. I'll be in Phoenix tomorrow. Come find me. I'm Ric Flair, baby. Woo! Forever.
We just saw Eddie Guerrero on the phone talking to Rey Mysterio and Conan. Obviously, in the minds of the filthy animals, there's still unfinished business with you, but at the same time, you have the big strap match with DDP.
I got a big strap match with DDP. Filthy animals, know this. You don't get to be what I've been in this business, or get to be where I've been, or who I am, by not being ready for anybody at any time. Bring it on, boys. Woo! Like I said, diamonds are forever. So is the Nature Boy. And as far as Paige goes, Paige, tonight, it's a strap match. Two men strapped to each other. Two of the very best this sport has to offer. Strapped to each other. Nowhere to go, nowhere to hide. Let me tell you something, Dallas. Let me tell you something, Diamond, Dallas Paige. Last Monday night, when I got through spanking your wife, she looked at Nature Boy in the eyes. She went, Nature Boy, woo, Nature Boy, woo, Nature Boy. I've never been spanked like that. You were right. I should have gotten that spanking, woo, from my daddy a long time ago. Paige, that hurts. Kimberly went, woo, Nature Boy, woo, Space Boy. She said that. I heard her, Paige. And tonight, brother, Tori tasted just a little bit of what the Nature Boy is all about. Mike, Tori get mad. She went, woo! She went, woo! Nature Boy. So, Paige, when I'm done with him tonight, Mike, I'm going to give Kimberly, woo, 2 times. Woo, 2 times. Woo, 2 times. The Nature Boy, 1 more time. Woo! Woo!
I don't know how we'll ever top that. He was having a lot of fun. I think we need to take a timeout. I'm at 112.07. I'm going to stop it down at 112.15. So 112.15. There it is. We'll press pause right now. Man, Ric Flair was fired up. You got to assume it's because he knew he was getting a little color later that day. You see, Rick is only happy when a razor cuts him. You and I should only be happy when they don't cut us. And that's why we're here to talk about our friends at Henson Shaving. Now, this is the same style razor that Ric Flair and, well, all of the horsemen are very closely familiar with. However, old Pop never saw a razor this thin. Let me explain. You see, Henson Shaving, well, this is a family-owned business, but making razors wasn't even the original plan. They're an aerospace parts manufacturer who made parts for the International Space Station and the Mars rover. And what they decided to do was use those aerospace-grade CNC machines to make the thinnest razors you've ever seen, 0.0013 inches, which is less than the thickness of a human hair. And what it means for you is a more secure and stable blade with a vibration-free shave. And I think you will love it. Go out of your way to check it out. By the way, the razor has built-in channels to evacuate hair and cream, which makes clogging virtually impossible. You're going to really love this razor. And what I love best about Henson is that they wanted to make the best razor, not the best razor business. Let me explain. If you're looking for the best razor business, then you want something that's plastic, that's going to fall apart. You're going to have some planned obsolescence. Oh, you can't use last year's blades. You want something proprietary that won't work anywhere else. And maybe you could hook them up with a subscription and they get stuck. See, they did none of that stuff. No gimmicks needed, Chris Candido style here for Henson Shaving. They give you the same old school feel because you're using a dual edge razor like your handsome ass grandfather used to use, but with all the benefits of new school tech. We're talking super thin razors and built-in channels to evacuate hair and cream. Here's the pro tip. Normally, we're used to this trade-off in life. If something's better, it costs more money. Well, this is one of those rare circumstances where not only is it better, it's also more affordable. Let's say no to subscriptions and say yes to a razor that will last you a lifetime. Visit hensonshaving.com/Eric to pick the razor for you and use the code Eric, and you'll get 2 years worth of blades free with your razor. Just be sure to add them to your cart. That's 100 free blades when you head to hensonshaving.com/Eric and use our promo code Eric. hensonshaving.com/Eric, and our promo code is Eric. And we are indeed watching Halloween Havoc 1999 together here. Hopefully you're tuned in with us. We are paused at 1 hour, 12 minutes, and 15 seconds. And one of the best parts about being a member of ad-free shows is you get to be a part of our live studio audience. And man, we've got a live studio audience with us today. You can actually appear on camera like Aaron was earlier and ask questions. And we've got a ton of new great bonus content. Things like the book. That's right, the book. We're rocking the book. You're going to love the book. I'm telling you, come check it out. David Crockett is bringing the noise every single month on adfreeshows.com. We've also got an incredible series called the Hacksaw Hour, Lex Expressed, Making the Towns with Blue Meanie. How about Monday Mailbag? We've got one with Mike Chiodo. We've got another with Nick Patrick. How about Tuesdays with the Taskmaster? All this and so much more available now at adfreeshows.com. By the way, if your business targets men that are 25 to 54 years old, no better place to advertise than right here with us. You hear some of the same sponsors week in, week out. Why is that? Well, because it really works. Find out how affordable it can be at advertisewitheric.com. I also want to mention, if you've got a question for next week's episode, you can ask it right now on social. That's easy to do. It's at 83Weeks on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. That's at 83Weeks. And we want to hear from you. And next week is going to be a super fun episode. We're also gearing up for some Ask Eric Anything episodes. You don't want to miss any of those. By the way, the easiest, cheapest, best way to support the show is over on YouTube. That's 83Weeks on YouTube.com. 83Weeks on YouTube.com. We've got tons of great swag and merch available for you right now as well. That's 83weeksmerch.com. 83weeksmerch.com. We'll do one last shameless plug here. Eric's new book, Grateful, is available now on Amazon. Anywhere you enjoy books, you can catch that book. I think it's one of the most underrated wrestling books of the modern era. So check out Grateful by Eric Bischoff. And hopefully you're locked and loaded with us in season 11, episode 1, Halloween Havoc 1999. We're at 1 hour, 12 minutes, and 15 seconds. I'll give us a countdown. Here we go. In 3, 2, 1, play.
From the Nitro Canada, WCW World Television Champion, the Crippler, Chris Benoit.
Talk about an interesting matchup here. It's going to be Chris Benoit against Rick Steiner. Obviously, those guys are known to work a little snug, work a little stiff, but probably different styles, if I had to say. But this will be fun because I don't remember ever watching this. And I think it's fun that you never watched this at all. And I don't know why it's fun to watch things with you that you never saw, but it feels like it's rare that we find something in WCW you didn't see, but we found one here with Halloween Havoc 1999.
Yeah, this is a little bit like seeing it live, you know. Clearly it's not, as we look at Chris Benoit, but it's it is fun seeing it for the first time. And I never even really followed up any of the news information or the coverage of this pay-per-view, so it's all brand new to me. You know, you talk about the contrast in styles, though, and certainly there would be, but given Rick Steiner's collegiate wrestling experience, pretty sure that Rick will be able to adapt. And Chris Benoit, obviously, you know, despite all the things that happen with Chris Benoit from a technical perspective, an in-ring perspective, you can't take anything away from Chris Benoit. He was one of the best ever to do it inside of the ring. So I'm really interested in seeing this match and how, because it all comes down to chemistry, right? You could have two very, very talented people, but if they don't have the chemistry and really work hard to get each other over and put on the best dance they possibly can, it can be less than exciting. But this is going to be interesting.
What's interesting to me is we've had the champs come out first twice. You know, Disco Inferno was the cruiserweight champ. He was out before Lash LaRue, the challenger. And now Chris Benoit is the TV champ. He's out first before Rick Steiner, the challenger. I just realized as we got a tight shot of that Halloween Havoc logo hanging from the rafters, that I think I actually have a little piece of history from this show. It was gifted to me by a friend of ours named Tony Schiavone, and he was gifted it by a friend of his named David Crockett. So I guess it's a wrestling memorabilia hand-me-down. But check this out, Eric. I've got the mic flag from this show.
That's awesome, brother.
Isn't
Good
that
for
cool?
you.
I was like, wait a minute. I think that logo's over here on the shelf. And yeah. So yeah, we got a big match here, and it's interesting. I don't think enough people talk about Rick Steiner's facial hair at this point, but we've seen Hogan with the blonde and black facial hair for a while, and we all know that the big bad booty daddy did it. What do you think about the skunk look here, the blonde right down the middle for Rick Steiner?
I kind of dig it. You know, he might not have been the first one to do it, but I kind of dig it. But look at the shape that Rick is in here. I mean, he looks awesome. You know, yes. Rick was never the jacked up bodybuilder look that Scott was. He was just naturally a big, strong dude. And he's lean as hell here. He looks great.
The Observer would talk about that first Nitro with Russo. The backstage feeling appeared to be mixed on this show, but it should be a far more competitive product once the show moves to 2 hours in January. The show will still be disorganized with a lot of wrestlers confused about things and not liking other things, but also realizing things were improving and more people were going to be added to the mix and stars will be attempted to be created. Is it just me, or does it sound like Meltzer's kind of optimistic about Vince Russo here?
It sure sounds that way. Given that Vince Russo, although he did, you know, take a lot of credit for getting a lot of people over in WWE, I think there was some buy-in at this point. You know, from firsthand experience, I can tell you that Vince Russo never got anybody over while I was working with him, either in WCW or TNA. There was an attempt. He'd put a lot of the younger guys in there and give them a lot of television time, because that's one of the things that Russo did to kind of galvanize some backstage support and try to get the talent behind him and to support the things that he was trying to do. So of course he'd give younger talent and talent that, to be honest, many of them not even ready for prime time, but he would give them those opportunities and kind of break the barrier that the old guard or the old guys, that had been keeping them down for so long. Russo played into that to again galvanize some support backstage.
I want to also mention that there is some confusion backstage. The Observer would write, wrestlers didn't know if they were supposed to be faces or heels in segments, as witnessed by Flair thinking he was the heel against the Filthy Animals in their segment, and the Filthy Animals thinking they were heel when they jumped Flair, resulting in a confused crowd which sided with Flair since they were 4-on-1 with him. Nobody could get straight answers, and that segment apparently changed 5 different times during the course of the show. Most of the non-wrestling segments were done in pre-taped segments before the show even started, with 3 crews working at a time. One headed by Ed Ferrara, another by Kevin Nash, and a third by Bill Banks, who's a former WWF magazine and website writer who left the WWF this past week and started with this show alongside the debuting Jeff Jarrett. There were scripts handed out, far more detailed than anybody had in the past, and nobody was doing interviews, not at least having an idea of what they were supposed to be saying. Far different from the past where guys were sent out with no preparation and winging it, and new characters, most notably Kimberly, Buff Bagwell, Jarrett, and the Filthy Animals, seemingly in line for big pushes. So there's a lot changing, and I know that Russo has always been a proponent of shades of gray, and I know that when the WWF first started to take off, Vince went on TV in the fall of 97 and said something like, we're no longer going to insult your intelligence, good guys versus bad guys. Where do you stand on the whole, hey, I don't know if I'm a heel or a face? And some people say, that doesn't really apply anymore. People cheer for stars. Where do you land on that?
I still disagree. There's not a form of entertainment known to mankind that doesn't have antagonists and protagonists. It just doesn't, not for any length of time and not successfully. That is, I don't believe it. I think it's an excuse for not knowing how to write great story. Vince McMahon may have bought into that conceptually for a minute, but are you going to tell me that Cody Rhodes, who's arguably one of the bigger stars in WWE right now, is not a babyface?
100% baby.
Are you going to tell me that LA Knight, who's emerging to be one of the top stars in WWE, doesn't know who his character is and is going to let the audience decide for him? That is so much bullshit. And I think that is absolutely a reflection of the fact that Vince Russo doesn't know, didn't know, and never will know fuck all about storytelling. It's so obvious to see for me from day one, and to maintain that philosophy and that be your vision for moving Nitro forward when you first come in, is we're just going to let the audience decide. My God, if that wasn't a red flag, I don't know what a red flag looks like.
You mentioned fuck all. Was he a nice guy? Because I never got to meet him either. And I know you said Russo didn't know fuck all, but I never had the pleasure.
I've met fuck all way too many times. Yeah, I know him pretty well. Nice guy.
Oh man. Meltzer would say, in the wake of the departures of Russo, Ferrara, and Jarrett, Vince McMahon began ordering all employees, not just talent, whether under contract or not, to sign a letter stating that upon leaving the WWF for any reason, including being fired, they could not work for WCW, or for that matter, any Time Warner company for the period of 1 year. Most, but not all employees signed that contract. Whether this will hold up in court is questionable, since WCW in its contracts with Darren Matthews, Paul White, and Chris Irvine had 90-day non-complete clauses at the end of their contracts, but WCW failed to enforce the clauses, and White and Irvine started with the WWF immediately upon the expiration of their WCW deals. The technical difference may be that Georgia, where WCW contracts are executed, is a right to work state. However, if WWE employees are living in Georgia, that same right to work standard could apply, rendering the paper meaningless. Non-compete clauses aren't unusual in competitive industries of this type. Typically, for example, in major markets and broadcast news, there's a 90-day period from the time an on-air personality leaves the station to when they can appear on a competing station. I know that still exists. I also know that most of the time they're not enforceable. They're not worth the paper they're written on unless you're some sort of high-level executive and blah, blah, blah.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
this whole idea that Vince is shook and going to everybody, employees included, saying, sign this, saying that when you leave for any reason, meaning I can still fire you, you can't work for anybody over there. And that anybody over there thing is because he himself once found that loophole. When WCW gave Lex Luger a release, it said he couldn't go work for the WWF. So Vince hired him for the WBF. And he appeared on WrestleMania via satellite that year, plugging and promoting the WBF. So, hey, he's learned from his own mistakes, right? And says, not even a Time Warner company.
First, going to the non-compete, and I'm obviously not an attorney, but I've had many conversations with a variety of attorneys on this subject. And you can put language like that in an agreement and you can get people to sign it. But if anybody wants to challenge it, and that's really the question, especially with WWE, do you want to go to an attorney and pay for an attorney to fight that out in court? It would cost you a fortune, and it would be a protracted situation. You're not going to get in front of a judge immediately. It's very difficult to challenge something like this in court with somebody that has, legally speaking, very, very deep pockets. But it would not hold up. It certainly wouldn't hold up in California.
No,
Absolutely would not hold up in California. Now, if you're an executive, if you're an employee, that's different. There are some situations where it would hold up, but in the case that we're talking about here, anybody that would have wanted to challenge that and could afford to challenge it and have the time to challenge it could have and would have won. I'm surprised it hasn't come up more in the past. But yeah, what's ironic about this is, in making it seem like, Vince Russo was such an integral part of WWE that Vince McMahon reacted, some would say overreacted, by mandating that everybody sign this agreement, promising never to work for another company, especially Time Warner or WCW. You think that would have come up when Lex Luger jumped ship, when everybody thought Lex Luger was under contract, didn't realize that his contract had expired. You would think that would have come up then. I don't know if it was because of Vince Russo or just Vince McMahon attempting to gain more and more control over things in WWE, but yeah, it would never hold up in court ever.
We know it's incredibly stupid. Incredibly stupid. I feel embarrassed even bringing it up, but it was said so often back then. I feel like we should at least address, because I know without me even talking about it with you before, you've at least heard it. When do you remember, and do you remember who was first to float the idea to you that perhaps, as silly as it sounds, perhaps Vince McMahon sent Vince Russo down to WCW to take it down from the inside? Because boy, in an industry just wrought with paranoia, that one to me was a real head scratcher from the first time I heard it.
Yeah, I don't buy that at all.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, I get why people were, particularly when we see, Russo's impact on WCW. One could easily jump to that conclusion based on the evidence in front of you. But no, I'm not buying that at all. It's just a silly, juvenile wrestling conspiracy theory.
We got a few more questions here. Riding shotgun with us today. We got Bobby, who wants to know, were you more in favor of champions taking the belt from town to town or having them transported? We've heard horror stories both ways. I think these days, a lot of the talent have a road belt, and then they have the pristine belt in a set of like moving lockers. They call it the TV belt that go on the trucks. Did you have a preference back in the day? Carry it with you or keep it on the TV truck?
I didn't have a preference back in the day, but if I were to be in a position to have to make a decision about that subject now, I would definitely want to keep the belt in the hands of the company. And not that I wouldn't necessarily didn't trust or wouldn't trust talent, but shit happens.
Yeah,
How
it
many
does.
times have we heard, people getting their car broken into and having shit stolen, or, things happen, and you want to have as much control over that as you possibly can. And the only way I see having as much control as you possibly can is for management or somebody assigned by management to maintain control of it.
Here's one from Aaron. Was Goldberg starting to hate the business at this point, or was he still enjoying the creative he was given? I know you're not here. We just saw a swerve. Dean Malenko just hit Chris Benoit in the head with a chair.
Swerve, bro. It's a swerve, bro.
Before you left, did Goldberg seem happy to you?
Goldberg never seemed happy, to be honest with you. He's just not a happy guy. When he was around the wrestling business, he was easier to get along with, and probably to a degree or another happier in the very beginning. And why wouldn't he be? Because he was getting the push of a lifetime and wasn't challenged to expand his character or any of the things that we, would require talent inside of the ring. But I think by this point, he was enjoying the professional wrestling much less than he was previously, for sure.
Well, we enjoyed that match. We saw Rick Steiner and Chris Benoit hook it up. Little interference from Dean Malenko. Perry Saturn reveals himself. Let's track the replay here.
Coming off that top rope, Steiner just threw that metal chair up in his face. I thought Malenko was going to waffle Steiner here. Turns around, parts the hair of Benoit. This was a conspiracy. This was a plan. Benoit thinks he's there to help. Didn't even defend himself. He didn't think he had to. He was jobbed big time. Your winner, Steiner.
He was jobbed big time. They're getting ready for the next match. We are going to get ready for that next match as well. Firstly, though, we've got a promo here from Bret the Hitman Hart backstage with Mike Tenay. Let's take a listen.
Not only the opportunity to win the World's Heavyweight Championship, but I understand severely injured your ankle as well, and doctors have even told you that you should not be in a wrestling ring tonight. How is this going to hinder you in your match against the Total Package?
Well, it doesn't look good, especially if you're talking to the doctors. But doctors always seem to paint the worst picture. Let me just say this: not the first time I've wrestled hurt. It's not the first time I've gone in the ring with Lex Luger, and I'm taking this thing one step at a time, literally. And I can say this much: I think that the fans are behind me. I can feel the fans behind me, and that's all that counts. Lex Luger, you've tried week after week after week to put me away with your baseball bat and everything else. But I can say one thing: you may have cost me the World Championship last week, but this week, no matter what, you will be excellently executed by the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be. And it's that simple, injury or not.
That was a good promo.
A great promo. And how about this version of Lex Luger? I want to get your opinion on this.
Introducing first, accompanied to the ring by Elizabeth. He is from Chicago, Illinois. The Total Package.
This is a different era for Lex Luger. He's coming out in a tearaway tank top, some tearaway track pants. He's the Total Package. He's no longer even calling himself Lex Luger, just the Total Package. Of course, in real life, the owner and proprietor of Main Event Fitness, but this is maybe as big as he ever was as far as the pounds. He looks like a professional bodybuilder here. But what do you think of this version of his character? We've seen a few different versions of him. Of course, Vince McMahon's vision, the red, white, and blue, and of course, Vince McMahon's vision, the narcissist. But we also had, the young upstart Lex Luger, and then the heel with the Horseman, and then the babyface with Sting, and the heel with Harley Race, the version of him that beat Hulk Hogan for the world title on Nitro, and now this bodybuilding type showdown presentation, himself and Miss Elizabeth. What do you think of this, I guess, final version of the Lex Luger character?
Obviously he looks phenomenal in terms of his physique. I don't like it. I I just don't like it. I mean, it's a subjective thing. I think, coming out wearing that tearaway sweatsuit or whatever it is, it looks like something that he'd wear to the gym, or taking the garbage out or whatever. I think it makes him look like less of a star, and that's not taking anything away from his physique. Obviously his physique is incredible here, but to me, he looks less than.
Yeah, that outfit makes it look very casual. He's not dressed like a superstar.
No, it's definitely a less than impression on me.
I mean, I'm sure it was comfortable, and I mean, there's no denying that. And goodness gracious, when the gear came off, he looked better than ever. But we're going to get a singles match here with Bret Hart and Lex Luger. You see where we're recapping when we had Bret versus Sting. Luger nails him with a bat, and that's the end of that. So now Bret's going to make his way out here. I think we should take a timeout. I'm at 132.49. I'm going to stop it at 55. 132.55. There it is. We'll take a timeout. This one is brought to you by Blue Chew. Bro, you want to get your ding dong real hard, bro? She's probably thinking you're getting a little older, bro. Hit her with the swerve. Hit her with the hottest your ding dong ever got. I'm talking about Blue Chews, bro. You want the Blue Chews? You go to bluechew.com. Got the same active ingredient as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but in a chewable form and at a fraction of the cost. And there's no swerve. Take them anytime, day or night, so you can plan ahead or be ready whenever an opportunity arises. The process is super simple. Sign up at bluechew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. Here's the best part. It's all done online. No visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversation, no waiting in line at the pharmacy. Blue Chew's tablets are made in the USA, prepared and shipped directly to your door, all in a discreet package. Blue Chew wants to help you have better sex. Discover your options at bluechew.com. Chew it and do it. We got a special deal for our listeners. Try Blue Chew free when you use our promo code 83Weeks at checkout. Just pay $5 shipping. That's bluechew.com. The promo code is 83Weeks, and you'll receive your first month free. Visit bluechew.com for more details and important safety information. And we want to thank Blue Chew for sponsoring today's podcast. Let's get back to it. We got Bret Hart walking to the ring here at 1 hour, 32 minutes, and 55 seconds. In 3, 2, 1, play.
So Bret Hart will come to the ring to face the total package. Two men who have gone at it before, and now as they stand and they cheer Bret Hart. A little bit of a limp there. Yeah, I think it's a very noticeable limp.
Well, because he got hit in the fucking leg with a baseball bat, Bobby, in the same calendar week. That's the reason he's limping. It's called selling, and I know you're just pointing it out for us, but thank you, sir. So Bret Hart slips through the ring, through the ropes here, wearing a Calgary Hitmen hockey jersey, not his trademark leather jacket. And you see a hockey jersey in the crowd. 0-99. Of course, we sadly lost Owen Hart earlier this same year, in May of the same year. Fast forward a handful of months, and here he is on pay-per-view against Lex Luger. You know, at this point, you're almost 2 years into the Bret Hart era of his WCW run. Is he like perhaps the biggest do-over that you wish you had in all of WCW?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. No question about it. You know, and I've taken responsibility for not having a great plan for Bret. Hold on. Oh, my dog just walked in and blew all the light out. I've taken responsibility for that any number of times, and there's no question about it. You know, if I had a do-over, I would have done it quite a bit differently. But, you know, they don't exist in real life too often. But, yeah, I have to acknowledge that one is the one that I would want to have back.
Meltzer would say there's nothing much to this match. Hart came out selling a bad ankle from Monday, but he pounded on Luger the entire match until the ankle went out, and Luger used a half crowd for the submission. Nobody believed that as a finish. It's crazy to me to think that Russo was involved in getting Bret so hot and so focused and so featured, and this is what we're doing. Meltzer would say,
Do you think maybe somebody else had a hand in getting Brett over the way Brett got over? I mean, if you buy Russo's bullshit that Vince wasn't really paying attention and was just signing off after taking cursory glances at formats.
"Oh, we know that's not true. Come on now."
I guess you could believe it, but I would imagine Vince McMahon had more to do with Brett getting over in WWE than Vince Russo did.
Aaron Sheen has a great question for us. He's watching along with us as part of our adfreeshows.com watch along. Aaron wants to know who has done more harm for the business, Russo or Meltzer?
Meltzer for sure. He's been doing it longer, and like any disease or any cancer that metastasizes over long periods of time, it does more damage. And clearly, I would throw Meltzer into that category.
Adam wants to know, what was your take on how Vince Russo was portrayed as the heel authority figure during this time? Before he returned with you in April of 2000, his face was never shown on WCW TV. His segments were always shot with him sitting behind the desk, directing orders where only his voice was heard to viewers. Did you find this very reminiscent of Dr. Claw from Inspector Gadget? I'll tell you, Adam, I was watching at the time and I thought he was just borrowing from Seinfeld, the way they always presented Steinbrenner. It was Larry David's voice, and you just saw the back of Steinbrenner, like the shadow outline. You never actually saw him, and that was sort of in this same era. What do you think? He's the heel authority figure, but you never saw his face in this era.
Not a fan at all. I don't know what else to say about it. I just think it sucked. I think Russo sucked as an on-camera talent. He was okay. He could cut a promo, but he's one of those guys that you really would have to limit the amount of time that you would expose him to the audience, because he'd wear thin very, very fast. And he didn't have the depth of character to be effective as a heel. He was just obnoxious and loud and smarmy. You've got to have a little more depth to your character than that. Anybody can do that character. And of course, his New York accent, which, by the way, you butchered the shit out of during that Blue Chew spot. I hope I never hear you do a New York accent again for the rest of our relationship, no matter how long that may be. But his New York accent was obnoxious enough to get him a little bit of heat, but you just couldn't put him out there too much or give him too much to work with, because he'd drive it right into the ground. He'd overkill it. And he shouldn't have been a character. He should have never been a character, period.
Here's one. This is from Brad Stanton. There are a few grudge matches on this card. Do you think a grudge match should have a gimmick attached, or should the build and story be good enough?
Come on now. Kind of know the answer to that one. Build and story. Look, there's a time and a place for certain quote unquote gimmick matches, whether it be a cage match or, Iron Man match or something to that effect. I can see if there's a build and a story leading to it. But a grudge match, which is nothing more than a different way of saying a match based on personal issues, should be a story that is played out over weeks or months and build and escalate and then have a resolution. And whether there's a gimmick in it or not shouldn't really matter. If you have, in my opinion, again, just my opinion, if you have to rely on a gimmick in that personal difference of opinion or personality conflict, whatever you want to call it, if you have to include a gimmick in it, then you probably don't have much of a story. Unless, again, if it's a cage match or an Iron Man match or something like that, that allows the gimmick to have a personality or to be a threat in the resolution of conflict, then I think it can make sense. But again, you can't do it effectively without a good story leading up to it.
We're going to try to get a lot of story with Sting and Hogan in just a moment. Let's do a few more questions here as we see Bret Hart trying to finish his match here with Lex Luger. Drew Landry wants to know, Eric, do you recall Sid not wanting to work with Goldberg or vice versa?
Well, I don't. don't recall ever having a conversation with either one of them where they expressed the idea that they didn't want to work with one or the other. Not during my time working with them at all.
Here's a follow-up. Do you remember where you were mentally at this time? So October 99, are you just fishing, enjoying life?
I was enjoying the hell out of life at this point in time. And to be honest, I was dealing with the fact that I had the rug pulled out from underneath me to a degree. It surprised me, to be honest with you. But after about a week, man, I was good. And I felt relieved, if anything else. So my head was really on straight. I wasn't interested in what was going on in wrestling. I was ready to walk away from it. Like I said, I had plenty of time, before I had to worry about things financially, 2.5 years or so. So that wasn't an issue for me. It was really just me taking the time to get away from it all, clear my head, and decide which direction I wanted to go. But mentally, emotionally, I was doing fine.
Here's another one. What'd you think of working with Ed Ferrara and Bill Banks when you were in WCW?
I liked Ed. I didn't have any issues with Ed. Had a fair amount of respect for Ed. I didn't think he was a big idea guy, but he could take ideas and help make them work for sure. He was he understood story. He was a legitimate writer. He understood story. Bill Banks, nice guy, but he was put into a position that he should have never been put into. He didn't have the experience, the personality, the instinct. He didn't have anything going for him as a producer or to be a member of a writing staff. He was a friend of Vince's, Russo's. That was all of the credibility that I guess Russo needed. And he was a bit of a, Vince Russo sycophant. So Vince liked being surrounded by people that looked up to him, which probably explains Bill Banks. And again, not taking anything away from him as a person. He was a good person. I liked him. Nice guy, but way, way, way over his head.
So we just saw a replay there of a single leg Boston Crab that Lex Luger applied to Bret Hart, and Bret Hart tapped out, and the crowd went mild.
Went mild? Is that what you said?
Yes.
That's funny.
I think we've got a special little skit or segment here coming up.
With all due respect, Bill Goldberg, do you feel that your actions of earlier tonight have made Sid Vicious even more dangerous than ever before?
Let me tell you something today. You see that? You see that? I get paid to kick people's ass. And as far as Sid's concerned, when I get his ass in that ring later on tonight, I'm going to separate his head from the rest of his body.
Wow, to say this intensity is picked up would be an understatement here.
Say no more.
Goldberg and Sid. If you think what you've seen is wild, just wait. It's all.
Oh.
So there you see Madusa coming out in a bikini, and she's got the Nitro cologne with her. And we saw a tight shot as we panned across the set. One of those tombstones read Crockett. And here comes Madusa with her plus twos along with her. Spencer would say this: Madusa came out with a bikini. Her body looks great for her age, but you don't see a lot of 37-year-old strippers, and there's a reason why. The implants look ridiculous, but this is a business of excess. She came out with Nitro cologne. We need to track some of this because you're not going to believe what we're trying to do to sell the cologne here. I just want to let the evidence speak for itself here. She's making her way ringside with the bottle of cologne. Here we go.
Look like a men's room at the Newark airport. All right.
She's standing on the announce desk, showing off the cologne to the crowd.
You better not wear that. That stuff smells horrible. That stinks.
So, gentlemen, what do you think about our new Nitro cologne? Nice, shapely bottle. Beautiful blue color matches my big, beautiful blue eyes.
Yes, they are beautiful. Yes.
What do you think, this is a pun? Do you think I enjoy coming out here in my itsy teeny weeny bikini and modeling this?
But you do what you're told. You have to.
Well, you can just tell those two higher echelons from New York, the superpowers,
The powers, yeah.
that I think it's just I think it's just absolutely bullshit.
Die! Stop!
Brain, you're right. You stink, man.
Woo. Oh, I got it in my eyes.
So the way to sell WCW's cologne is to tell everyone that it smells like the Newark Airport men's room. It stinks. It's horrible. What?
And that whole scene, everything that we just saw was designed to get Russo and
Yes.
Ed over.
Yes.
That was the only reason that scene, that segment, whatever you want to call it, existed. And oh, by the way, you're dumping all over a licensee. And maybe the Nitro cologne was a really bad idea, but it's a licensee that is spending money, and they promoted it. They did their best. And even though we may never have done business with Nitro cologne again, the idea that other licensees
Would see that?
and is this a company that I want to spend money with?
No.
Unfucking believable, and a just perfect reflection of who Vince Russo really was and is. He's fraud. Doesn't know anything about the television business.
Let's let you catch up here with this storyline with Hulk Hogan and Sting. So we just saw a little video package sort of recapping where we are, and we're hearing the music crank up. This is for the World Heavyweight title. By the way, I know what you're thinking. Is this the main event? No, this is match 7 out of 10. There's 3 more matches after this. There's roughly an hour left in the pay-per-view, so a total of 4 matches on the card. Let's take a listen.
WCW World Heavyweight title at stake here. He's great, and now it's time. Well, you know the rest of them. As they stand and they wait the arrival of the one and only Hulkster himself. Oh. Get out here, Frank. What's going on here? Look at her. Entrance announced Hogan. The challenger.
Yeah, so you're probably wondering what the hell's going on. They're going to let the music play all the way through. Meltzer would say they did the Hogan Sting angle next, so fans would boo it heavily and still have 3 more matches left in the show to forget about it. Hogan at first didn't come out, even though his music played. Finally, he came out in street clothes, whispered something to Sting, and laid down, and Sting covered him, and the ref counted 3. No bell sounded to start the match. They immediately cut to a clip of Goldberg with the abrupt cut designed to make people think that what happened wasn't supposed to. The idea, as this was designed, would be Sting's later agreeing to wrestle after this fiasco showed he was a babyface all along and a fighting champion. It wasn't made as clear to the fans what this was all about as it needed to be, and with no follow-up on TV the next day, it came off like a silly exercise in masturbation. The feeling from those in the building live is that nobody understood what this was about, and because it was never referred to on television the next night, and that was a Russo call, by now, nobody understands, and few people even remember it amid the morass of angles they have to digest every week. So this is silly, what we're doing here. And it is sort of the precursor to what we would eventually see at Bash at the Beach 2000. I just don't understand how this is on a wrestling pay-per-view. Like, the way that we think the business works is let's take our licensees and humiliate them and embarrass them and diminish their product. And then let's get the fans hyped up and have them vote with their wallet and come out of their pocket to buy a pay-per-view, not just watch the show for free. We'll card out 2 of our biggest stars, really the 2 franchises of WCW, Sting and Hulk Hogan, and we'll pit them against each other. Crow Sting versus red and yellow classic Hulk Hogan, the dream match, if you will. We never saw this version. This was going to be our chance. And instead, swerve, bro. We're just going to have one guy lay down for another. What are we doing?
This is weird. Again, I didn't see it when it happened, and your recap of it certainly helps me feel better about my overall opinion about Vince Russo. But the fact that there was no follow-up tells me that this was never a story. This was never a plan. This was an idea in the moment. Crash TV booking, bro. That's what this was. I can't wait to talk to Hulk again soon and just ask him about this. Like, where did this come from? Was there a plan that just everybody decided not to follow up on? Or did you just show up and this was laid out for you and you just went along with it? Which is hard for me to believe, but it's just bizarre.
I mean, how would you even describe Sting's facial expression there? I mean, as he's holding the belt over his head in the ring after Hulk Hogan has been a no-show, he's sort of looking around like, what the hell's going on? And yeah. Trying that music again.
All right, we're going to get this one underway. Good job, David Pitt.
Like,
this is hard to even dissect. I mean, this is so bizarre that it's really hard to analyze and try to imagine what anybody was thinking.
Clearly, they're trying to make you assume that this isn't part of the plan and something must be going on and what's happening.
But the idea of confusing the audience or somehow trying to harness confusion to work in your favor, and that's just
Look at Hogan not running out, smiling, pointing to the crowd, no knee braces, in jeans tucked into his boots, a denim shirt, cut off sleeves, black bandana, street clothes. Hogan here.
Now, I could tell by looking at his face, this was not something that he was cool with. I don't know why he went along with it, but this was not anything that he felt comfortable with. I'm going to call him. I may call him this afternoon and ask him.
His head right here. He's in Sting's face.
Playing games with him.
He said he had that. What is it?
He's just got that. I'm getting this. I just want to get this the fuck over with and get home. That's.
What the hell is going on? What the? Oh, what?
You got me. I'm dumbfounded.
No, now hold on here.
That was weird. Now I get it. I'm going to get yeah, but you did the finger poke of doom. There was a plan. It may have sucked, but there was a plan.
Yes.
That was just fucking random.
So next up, it's Goldberg and Sid Vicious. They immediately cut to that package. Meltzer would say this about the show. The new WCW direction became even more apparent with the Halloween Havoc pay-per-view show on the 24th from the MGM Grand Garden Arena in Las Vegas. The direction is throwing a lot of angles and surprises at the fans with a lot of last-minute card changes and concentrating a lot less on bell-to-bell or natural logical progression. For example, on the finishes, it seems more important to surprise fans with the results, like Brad Armstrong over Berlin is the best example, but also Lex Luger over Bret Hart. Even if the reason fans would expect the loser to win was because it would make a more logical progression based on who is getting the immediate push. The pushing of Russo and Ferrara, although to their credit, they pushed the idea of themselves more than their names, was evident throughout the show. The argument that WCW is swimming in negative momentum and needs a facelift is strong. But even on WWF, you wouldn't just get hit with the idea constantly during the shows regularly about the hot writers that were just hired. In many ways, from the formatting and pacing, this seemed more like a WWF pay-per-view show with the crowd being dead for most of the show, unlike WCW, which often has hotter pay-per-view crowds, except with far lower production values, and they lack a strong 20-minute main event to generally make up for the weak undercards. So Meltzer saying basically, hey, this took away all the good things about WCW. and we didn't add a whole lot. Lots of swerves. Let's focus on what made WCW WCW. How about this as an entrance, though? Sid Vicious coming to the ring wearing his normal gear, the black leather vest, the body glove elbow pad, the black boots, the black trunks, the U.S. title, the three-plater made by Joe Marshall, firmly around his waist. But the blood dried on the top of his head. I like that look. He looks like a movie character. What a badass.
I agree with you, brother. I think, I'm not a big fan of blood, but this is an effective way of doing it. And he meaning Lex, looked scary as hell. Like excuse me, I just called him Lex. Sid looks scary as hell here and believable. I believe he's hot based on what we saw earlier. He would be. This is excellent. It's the only good thing I've seen on the show so far, actually, was Sid walking out with dried blood on his face.
You're going to see something else happen right as Goldberg's about to make his entrance here.
Goldberg gets his intro, and it's standing for the unmistakable music of the man who will try to put an end to all the talk about the Millennium Man, all the talk about the street.
I mean, there's a lot of Goldberg signs in that crowd.
I didn't want to interrupt while we're tracking it, but man, he is still over here.
There's so many. I mean, the Goldberg, like foam fingers, the signs, like
Look
the
at
shirts.
that.
People are really, really with Goldberg here at 99. There was more life left in that character.
This is really the only thing I've seen the crowd get excited about so far in 2 hours and 11 minutes and 25 seconds. He's still got it.
So here he comes out of the locker room. We saw the head of security there go ahead and open him up, and now he's walking to the ring with all the local Las Vegas police force. You would see this a lot whenever like Mike Tyson or those type fights would happen. I love Doug Dillinger being a part of this, though. Let's track it here because I think something big's going to happen.
Intensity, but the thing about this match tonight that makes it different than any other is what happened before and how the incident that opened up the forehead of Sid Vicious has lit a fire under Sid Vicious like we've never seen.
We can see it from our vantage point right here. He's not down on one knee. He's not sitting on that turnbuckle. He's pacing like a caged animal. He's got about 7, 8, 9, 10 stitches that looks over that eye, and he just paces back and forth, back and forth. He wants Goldberg. He wants him in the ring now, tonight. It's going to be great.
Got to give Mike today a lot of credit. He asked a very difficult question about making a mistake. And we know how volatile Goldberg has been since Monday, and it would be very easy for Goldberg just to snap on today. But today asked the right question, and Goldberg said, hey, I'm ready. I am more ready than I've ever been. And here they come, the police, ushering in Goldberg.
I don't think this town has enough police to keep these two apart. Like I said, I can watch Sid from here. He's taking a couple more steps closer to the rope. Walking out to meet Goldberg. These two big men are ready to fight. Goldberg ain't gonna back away from anybody.
He used the right term there, Brian. I think we're going to see a fight. A fight that has been months and months and months in the making.
I mean, this man Vicious was attacked by Goldberg. Goldberg has every right to go to the power and be.
Look up the aisle there, Eric.
Oh.
Scott Hall. And Kevin, there's the Outsiders. Remember Monday, they were looking all over Goldberg. They never found it.
So the Outsiders are jumping Goldberg before he gets in the ring. And my question this entire time, Eric, was, what the fuck are the 6 police officers doing?
Don't ask logical questions, Conrad. You're not allowed to ask a logical question on a wrestling show, particularly one that Vince Russo booked. But before we continue lambasting Russo for all that it's worth, did Bill Goldberg not have the coolest freaking entrance?
Oh, dude, it was amazing.
It still gives me goosebumps when I see it.
He's a star.
Awesome.
I mean, that's all there is to it.
It's just, it was so perfect for him. Like if an entrance could be a reflection of one's character, that entrance was really a reflection of Bill Goldberg's character.
Meltzer would say, match had a ton of heat. The only match that could make that distinction. Sid bled heavily and mainly took punishment, but would never quit. The announcers really played up Sid's guts and toughness until finally Mickey J stopped the match. They gave Goldberg the belt. Who knows what the rules are regarding matches stopped on blood and titles changing hands nowadays, since the rules change as they go along. Goldberg acted like he didn't want the belt, but eventually took it. Rick Steiner helped Sid to the back, but he turned around and wanted more. The announcers did a great job with this match. 2.5 stars. You don't expect Dave Meltzer to be heaping praise on a Goldberg Sid Vicious match. He ethered these guys issue after issue, just destroyed them. But man, he loved this one. And I think a lot of it was just the fans. The fans were with it. The fans view these guys as superstars. Therefore, they are. And
you know what vibe I get though, Conrad, in watching this?
Is that Bob Ryder's cousin in the front row? I'm listening.
No, come on now. I get the impression that Sid was more into this match than anything I've seen Sid do in a long time. It just felt natural for Sid here. He didn't feel like he was playing a character. You know, it's not any one thing, but I think you're right about the crowd. Obviously, there was a ton of energy for Goldberg here. And I think the setup for this match earlier on in the show was a nice thread. Hats off, credit where credit is due. It was a nice thread to help set up this match. It was done very, very well. It was believable. It wasn't overdone. The fact that Sid came out with dry blood on his head still, really nice touch, advanced the story or continued the story, reminded the audience of what happened earlier in the show. But I think all of those things combined, you know, just this is pretty freaking good. I got it. Hats off, man, to both of these guys and the setup, whoever was involved in the setup for it. They did a great job formatting it, Sid into the show. Like I said, you know, with blood all over him. Nice touch.
I mean, he looks fantastic. It looks really, really badass. Speaking of badass, we've got a member of our live studio audience who's going to join us here. I understand Denovius Mack is going to join us here on 83 Weeks, and he has a question for you, Eric. Denovius, welcome to the show. What's your question for Mr. Bischoff?
Hey, good morning, guys. I really had a question about the Radicals, Eric. If you were still there instead of Vince Russo, do you think you would have persuaded them to stay as opposed to jumping ship to WWF?
That's a hypothetical. You know, I really don't know how to answer that. I know I would have tried for sure. I don't know that I would have been successful or not, but I certainly would have tried. I think I would have had much more of a shot than Russo did. But again, I don't know, man. It's hard for me to answer that one. I can only answer in being honest and saying I certainly would have tried.
Okay. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
What are you up to today, Mac Daddy? What's going on? Where are you driving to?
I'm actually going to pick up Kaya. I just left the hospital. My mother-in-law had emergency surgery. She broke her hip. And so she's fighting cancer. So, you know, trying to get her in good spirits. But yeah, going to pick up Kaya and then help my mother move. So.
All right, brother. Well, hang in there. Tell Kyle I said hi.
Well, I definitely will. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thanks for Denovius Mack taking time to join us here today. We're still seeing the two gladiators slug it out here. Some blood from the head of Sid Vicious, and it's starting to get on Goldberg. I mean, this looks like a big-time heavyweight title fight, and this is probably as good of a place as any to follow Hogan Sting. Like, if you're trying to get the crowd back, this is a way to do it right here.
Yeah, and it's, you know, I've made the same mistake myself any number of times, and others have pointed it out, but it's particularly interesting to me that both guys, big, jacked up, powerful, just beasts of men, and they're both wearing black tights and black boots. It's just, I don't know, different. And maybe it stands out so much to me because they're both so physically impressive. There's like very little to distinguish the two of them other than Sid had hair and Bill didn't.
Yeah, one's taller and has curly hair. That's it. Ryan says, I was there that night and was legit pissed off at the Sting Hogan bullshit. I wasn't the only one. Lots of us leaving the MGM Grand that night were talking shit about Russo and his direction. For me, this was the end of WCW as far as being a regular watcher. I'm a firm believer you do not advertise a main event world title match and then pull this shit. What do you think? You know, doing a bait and switch on the advertised main event, pay-per-view, not TV, that's less than ideal, no?
Yeah, it is. And again, you know, you're charging people money. You're giving them what is otherwise, up until this match, actually, what is otherwise just a 3-hour television show.
Yes.
And then you're going to pull the main event out from underneath them after it's been advertised. Look, sometimes it happens because of an injury or whatever, but to intentionally do it, a reflection indeed of Vince Russo's understanding of television and the business of the wrestling business.
Well, these guys are going to have a pretty fun match here. We mentioned they got a good rating in the Observer. Unfortunately, it's not enough. You know, business is trending a certain way. Halloween Havoc 1998 had Goldberg and DDP on top. Famously, it went long. Maybe we didn't get enough satellite time everywhere. Underneath, we had Warrior and Hogan. Maybe that's not famous. Maybe that's infamous. Either way, it did 310,000 buys. That was the last Halloween Havoc, 1998. This one does 230,000 buys. So we're down 80,000 buys. Less than ideal.
Yeah.
That's a pretty major fall off to go from 310 to 230.
That's a big fall off. And
yes.
I don't remember what this pay-per-view, what they charged for this particular pay-per-view back then, but 50% of it would have been WCW revenue. So that's a massive financial hit as well.
You figure $15 on the WCW side of things times 80,000. That's a lot of money.
Yes, indeed. Particularly at this point in time in 1999, where WCW needed that revenue. Definitely needed the revenue.
The month before, we had Hogan versus Sting for the WCW title. That's where Sting would turn heel. We also had another Goldberg DDP match at Fall Brawl. That one only did 130,000. So we're up here 100,000 buys, but things are trending down.
And we're up 100,000 buys because of the strength and the history of Halloween Havoc.
Yes.
To be honest, not because of the card.
Yes. The next match here, because now we've got a winner. It's been stopped because of blood loss. You're going to see Mickey J go ahead and tell Sid, kick bricks, kick rocks, get out of here. And
what's our time code right now, Conrad, if I can?
208, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 208, 17, 18, 19. So Mickey J indicating that Goldberg is our new U.S. champ, even if he is reluctant to be the U.S. champ. I mean, so far, what are you thinking of this show, Eric?
Other than this match, it's the only thing up until this point that I found interesting at all. The rest of it is just a confusing mess to me. Now, part of that is because, again, I wasn't there. I don't know the storylines going into this. Perhaps there were some, but if there were, and this pay-per-view was to be about the resolution, at least of some of those matchups, didn't deliver. Just really flat. And the audience was obviously flat for everything except for this match. So I don't know. On a scale of 1 to 10, I think I'd give it a 3 at this point. The promos really, the Paige and Kimberly promo, even the Ric Flair promo. I know it's hard for Ric Flair to do a bad promo, but for Ric Flair, that was a bad promo.
Yeah, he was doing impressions of his family through there that I caught, extended family that I'll keep to the vest. But it's an interesting backstage phenomenon in this show because you've got these new writers. People are optimistic. They're hopeful. We see Goldberg still over. Maybe he's lost in the middle. We see Bret Hart. We're hoping he's going to do something, but he lost to Lex Luger. The Outsiders made their sole appearance on the show. They're not wrestling. It was just that one attack. It's an interesting time, but behind the scenes, we've got all the stuff with Hogan and now the stuff with Flair. Meltzer would say the plan is to temporarily finish up Flair on the pay-per-view a role Flair isn't happy about at all. At press time, they were going to change Flair versus Page to a strap match, which would end with Flair taking such a beating he'll be stretchered out and hospitalized and said to be injured to the extent he can never wrestle again. The idea Flair was told was that they would bring him back in a few months in the figurehead president role, presumably as a heel, and he would probably wrestle occasional matches in that role. So Flair's career in WCW is scripted to basically end with him getting rolled and humiliated on Nitro, coming back being stretchered out by Page, and one of two people in the company, the other being Shane Douglas, for that other than personal reasons he was having to put over. So I'm not really sure what to make of all this, but certainly it feels as if we're trying to force a youth movement. Here's a little skit here with Kimberly, and this is from what we saw on Nitro that they were alluding to earlier with Ric Flair, I believe, in the bathroom. Let's take a listen.
Don't come out until I tell you to. We are going to have a lot of fun tonight. A lot of fun. I love your enthusiasm. Oh, enthusiasm. This is going to knock him out. Quite a lot.
Woo! All right, it's the lovely Miss Kimberly in the flesh herself. Honey, the boy couldn't make it, but Spaceball could, live in color. Woo! And tonight, honey, you're going to get the 14-time spanking. Woo! If your daddy just gives you a long time.
So it's supposed to be David Flair. It's actually Ric Flair. That adds some context to what we saw earlier with these promos from both Ric Flair and DDP. Up next is the strap match. Meltzer would say this turned out to be a lot more heated outside the ring. Flair was really upset all week with the plan to retire him and end his career with this match, and against Page of all people. This also blows the Flair Benoit plan program. Anyway, the company had to make a deal with Standards and Practices over the Sid match because of showing blood so graphically on the show, since it needed to be seen to justify the stoppage. That was supposed to be the only blood on the show. Flair bladed and wound up bleeding far more than Sid, making the Sid stoppage make no sense since there was no stoppage here, not to mention freaking out the guy from Standards and Practices. To fans, this was a strap match with very disappointing heat. It wasn't any good, although they did whip each other hard with the straps. The only real pops were crotch shots and the figure four. The finish would see Page choke out Flair with the strap and then give him the diamond cutter. Referee Charles Robinson would hold up his count at 2, and the bell rang anyway, and it was supposed to be a pinfall. Please don't ask me why. Page then laid out Robinson with a diamond cutter and continued to choke Flair with the belt. David Flair shows up with a crowbar to make the save, but he was beaten up by Kimberly. Page got the crowbar and destroyed Flair even more, finishing with a low blow with a crowbar. Flair was carried out by stretcher, and backstage, the filthy animals all jumped a helpless Flair and a hopeless David, threw him in the back of the ambulance, and drove away in the ambulance. It was funny seeing Conan in an arm sling, attacking Flair with the arm in the sling. So listen, this is a little silly, but we've got Sting out here cutting a promo. Let's take a listen.
For somebody, anybody, to show up here for a fight. Because it's showtime, folks.
That takes a lot of guts. Boy,
So Sting is saying, hey, I'm a fighting champion. I want to defend my title. I didn't come here to not wrestle. I want to give you guys a good show tonight. It's showtime. Who wants to wrestle for the world title? So it's an open challenge. We know it's going to be answered by Goldberg. Yeah. They did Goldberg and Sting unannounced.
Hey, Conrad, can we take a quick break right now? Because there's something really important I want to talk about. I'm going to shut down here too.
I'm going to shut it down at 2:14:29.
All right.
There it is. We're at 2:14:29. Eric's going to take a quick break, and we are too, to tell you how you need to start every day with one delicious scoop of AG1. That's all it takes to set yourself up for success. With just one delicious scoop of AG1 and a cup of water, you get 75 different high-quality vitamins, nutrients, everything you need to feel strong and finish strong through your day. I'm talking about supporting your immune system. I'm talking about giving you better gut health. I'm talking about giving you a boost in energy. And I'm talking to you specifically if you hate taking pills or vitamins, or you want a supplement that actually tastes great. AG1 is your foundational nutritional supplement that delivers comprehensive nutrients to support whole body health. AG1 replaces your multivitamin and your probiotic and more in one simple drinkable habit. It's a science-driven formulation of vitamins, probiotics, and whole food source nutrients. They've really raised the standard, and we're going to challenge you to try it. You're going to set yourself up for success with these 75 key ingredients that give you all the daily nutrients you really need to support energy, focus, strength, and clarity. And if a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, we want you to try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Just go right now to drinkag1.com/83weeks. That's drinkag1.com/83weeks. Check it out. drinkag1.com/83weeks. And we also want to remind everybody that if you haven't already, you need to make plans to come see Eric live and in person at WrestleCade. WrestleCade Weekend is a 3-day family convention for both fans of wrestling and sports entertainment. It brings together more than 125 of your favorite wrestling stars from all eras, featuring live pro wrestling pay-per-views all 3 days. How about some meet and greets with some of your favorite wrestling stars? There's even Q&A panels, live wrestling podcasts, costume contests, wrestling-related merch for sale, and so much more. It's all going down November 24th, 25th, and 26th at the Benton Convention Center in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Our very own Eric Bischoff will be on site representing ad-free shows, and be sure to check out a version of The Extreme Life of Matt Hardy, as Matt and John Alba will be on stage that Friday night at 8:30 Eastern. Tickets are on sale now. Go see Eazy-E. You'll be glad you did. It's WrestleCade.com. That's WrestleCade.com. And we're watching Halloween Havoc here from season 11, episode 1. We're at 2 hours, 14 minutes, and 29 seconds, getting a wide shot from the top of the arena at 2 hours, 14 minutes, and 29 seconds. I'll count us back in here in 3, 2, 1, play.
And now that, have you ever seen anything like that on a pay-per-view on WCW?
Never in my life.
Never.
No.
And you still stink. You still reek. Go ahead.
We're still burying the cologne, but here we go. We know now we've got Sting defending the world title, so there's one more match after this match. Making their way to the ring right now, Kimberly right out front, followed closely behind Diamond Dallas Page. This is our strap match. Man, talk about all the backstage maneuvering. Ric Flair not too happy, and well, it's a different era for WCW. Before we took our break, you said you had something you wanted to talk about that had been weighing on you.
Yeah, I do. You know, those of you who've been listening to 83 Weeks here know that I love to grill. I love good quality meat. And a while back, my nephew, actually, Ben Pollock in Minnesota, he knew how much I love to cook. He knew how much I love great quality meat. He turned me on to a company called Riverbend Ranch. Riverbend Ranch is based in Idaho. It's a family-owned cattle operation and processing plant. And they've been really perfecting the genetics of their beef and their cows and their bulls for almost 27 years, really super analyzing up to 40 different kind of genetic factors that help produce the very best meat. So I tried it and absolutely loved it. Now, this is not someone who's paying us to be on the show. I actually reached out to the team over at Riverbend Ranch and said, I love this product so much, I have to share it with our audience. You can order from Riverbend Ranch. They deliver right to your home. There's different packages, but the quality of the meat is so good. And there's a couple reasons for it. Number one, it's certified Black Angus. The meat is marbled to perfection. So it's tender, it's juicy. It has all the flavor that you would expect in some of the finer restaurants in the country. The meat is aged, and that's the one thing that you don't get when you buy meat in the store, because processing plants can't afford to have meat hanging on a hook aging for 30 days while they want to get it out, because they want to get it out to the store, they want to get it on the shelf, they want to get it sold as quickly as possible. Not at Riverbend Ranch. They process their own, they grow their own meat, no antibiotics, nothing ever, no hormones ever. They raise it, they process it, and they ship it right to you, the customer. I'd like you to try it. I think you're going to agree with me. Go to getriverband.com. You'll get some information there. Someone will reach out to you, talk to you about all the different packages that are available. And they're also going to share with you how you can actually save quite a bit of money. And when you compare Riverbend's products to some of the other beef delivery companies that are out there, some of them that have advertised on this show, you're going to be surprised at how much money you can save by buying the highest quality meat you can find anywhere. Have it delivered to your home. Pretty sure you're going to feel just like I do. It is one of the best opportunities out there to have a great quality product delivered to your door and save money in the process. Just go to getriverbend.com. Again, one more time, getriverbend.com.
So in the ring, the guys have hooked it up now. Flair and Paige both hooked up with the strap. Paige on the outside of the ring, Flair in his signature red trunks and boots and tights. And it's crazy to think that once again, here we are 5 years after the first time he lost a retirement match at Halloween Havoc. That was back with Hogan in 1994. Hey, we want to retire you. It feels like that was something that Russo was trying to do.
Well, Russo had this. Russo's thing was, again, and some of this was just Russo trying to galvanize some support backstage, but Russo was dead set against the older talent.
Yes.
He just wanted to get them off the roster any way possible. And he was very transparent about it. I'll give him that. He didn't try to hide it. He was transparent as hell, but it did not go over well with a lot of that talent.
Well, something that, I mean, this whole pay-per-view feels a little snake bit. We're seeing, Flair and DDP have a match here. These are clearly two of the biggest stars in WCW, but we talked a little bit about the promo from Paige earlier and how neither one of us really liked it. I mean, you just straight up said it sucked. I don't think anybody wanted to boo DDP. I mean, I know once upon a time, talking 93, 94, 95, 96, certainly they wanted to boo DDP, but by 97 on, I feel like, we've decided he's our underdog. He's one of us. He's the working man. He's the everyman. We want him. He's us. He's the people's champ. And it's hard for us to just flip that on and off. Like, I know some characters are better suited one way or another, even though, there is a lot about the DDP character that you could find annoying and say, oh, I don't like this, or I don't like that, or whatever, different parts of his personality he would reveal on camera. The character at this point, I just feel like is better suited as a babyface.
And you know why, Conrad? I think we've talked about this before, where certain characters are better playing kind of a dialed up version of themselves. Stone Cold Steve Austin clearly being one of them. To a lesser extent, Diamond Dallas Page, but the same holds true with Paige. In real life, Paige is one of the nicest, most generous, caring people you'd ever meet. And we're seeing that now with, DDPY yoga and everything that he's doing and all the help that he's tried to provide a lot of people over the last several years, 10 years, really. He's just more comfortable as a babyface because that's who he really is. And yes, you could turn the volume up on that a little bit to make it interesting for television, but I don't think Paige was ever good as a heel because he had to overcompensate so much for who he really was that it didn't come off authentic. And that's one of my biggest issues with it. Even listening to that promo that he did, that wasn't Paige. That was so forced. It just, that's just a long-winded way of me saying I absolutely agree with you. He was way better as a babyface. I'm just trying to put it into context why I think he was better as a babyface.
Let's ask the question everybody at this point listening wants to know. Greg asked it. Did Eric ever wear the WCW cologne?
No, because I agreed with Bobby. It sucked, but I wouldn't have said it on TV while they were writing us checks. I would have kept it to myself. Might have told my wife, but no, it was not a stellar product.
Bryant had a great question. He's watching along with us from adfreeshows.com. He says, do you think Goldberg would have benefited from having a mouthpiece? He never had any good promos and always seems uncomfortable talking. Yeah, I think a manager, a mouthpiece for him, that could have worked. What say you?
It would have been fun to try. I don't know about Bill's personality. I don't know that he would have wanted to share the limelight. And I'm not saying he was an egomaniac. Bill felt very comfortable in his role. And I'm not sure we could have convinced Bill to get comfortable with a manager. And it would have to be the right manager. It couldn't be somebody that came off like a clown or an over the top type of a manager. But I think if you found the right person and you cast that person, male or female, to be more real, more realistic of a character as an agent or a manager, as opposed to a traditional, Jimmy Hart type manager. Nothing against Jimmy Hart. It was great when Jimmy was doing it. But at this point in time, I don't think it would have worked. And it certainly would not have worked with Bill. But I think cast appropriately, perhaps it could have worked. And it would have helped to take the pressure off Bill having to talk, because if you gave him anything more than 15 or 30 seconds, it was a stretch.
It's a bit of a stretch to think that Flair is going to be in a grudge match like this on pay-per-view and not bleed. I know the standards and practices people were promised one thing. The continuity piece is what disappoints me. Like, Flair is an old school pro, and I get when he's just looking at his match in a vacuum like this. Yes, we need color. But him maybe going against the grain and doing this on his own without really the full understanding that, hey, we're going to have a blood stoppage finish earlier in the show. That's less than ideal.
Less than ideal is putting it mildly. That was really what that whole match between Sid and Goldberg was all about. It started in that backstage segment and carried through into the match itself. And as you pointed out, a blood stoppage, which is very, very rare. And now we're going to have Ric Flair out here bleeding like a stuck pig. Not good.
Not good indeed. Let's do a few more questions here. We've got some questions from our live studio audience here. This one comes to us from Aaron. Has Eric seen the clip on Twitter of Sid in the parking lot screaming for Goldberg? People think it was the worst acting ever in wrestling. You ever seen that clip?
I don't think I have. Or maybe I did have, and if it was as bad as it sounds like it was, maybe I just put it out of my mind. I do that sometimes. Something bothers me so much, I just vaporize it so that I never have to think about it again.
Well, something that a lot of people are going to be thinking about is Saudi Arabia. This coming weekend, WWE is going to be bringing another super show over that way. And as you and I are recording this, just last night, or I guess yesterday afternoon, we saw Vince McMahon with The Undertaker at the Tyson Fury fight. And they sat Vince McMahon next to Mike Tyson and Eminem, which I found hilarious. I watched the fight. I thought Tyson lost on a decision. It wound up being a split majority decision. 2 judges to 1. Tyson Fury retains against Nagano. And I think these spectacle pay-per-views, that's probably the biggest one. I mean, they constructed a whole arena specifically for this fight. And now WWE is going to be there this weekend. They're pulling out all the stops. Of course, we know that a lot of the big stars, including John Cena, are going to be on that card. It's still a controversial decision politically, but allegedly $100 million is the value of the current contract with Saudi Arabia. You got to assume they're looking to get a little more money, and that's why Vince McMahon was over that way. But also on that same day, as you and I are recording on Saturday, we saw a main event that a lot of people thought would have been reserved for a pay-per-view. They announced on Wednesday's Dynamite that MJF would be defending his world title against Kenny Omega. Kenny Omega, going into this match, was the longest reigning AEW heavyweight champion of all time. It was said that if MJF would get the win here, then he would, in fact, wind up being the person to break that record and become the longest reigning AEW champion in history. And somehow, some way, MJF got his hand raised, and afterwards, Kenny Omega cut quite a promo for the live crowd, saying that it was MJF's time now. I found that interesting. And of course, whenever people think about big time title matches on free TV, they always think about you, Hogan, and Goldberg. I saw some people saying, why didn't they make this a pay-per-view? Obviously, times are a changing, but AEW is still in the pay-per-view business. What do you think of the decision they made to put MJF and Kenny Omega on free TV?
With no advanced promotion, no story, just announce it and do it. I'm not going to be critical of putting it on live TV for obvious reasons, because AEW, Tony Khan, has to service their client. Their client, in addition to the audience, their client is the network. But here's where I just have questions. I'm not being critical. I promised myself a couple of weeks ago I was going to refrain from being critical as much as I could. But if you're going to put MJF and Omega on free TV, to do it, number one, on a Saturday night when you're up against Game 2 of the World Series and college football, you know you're going to get your ass handed to you. And to make that match on a Saturday night against that kind of competition, when you know no matter what you do, you're going to get your ass handed to you, that makes me question it even more. I mean, it's bad enough to put that match on television without any buildup, no storyline. Nobody in the world could answer the question, legitimately answer the question, why is this match happening? Other than making up some, indie-rific bullshit. It just makes no sense. And if you're going to do it on free TV and you're going to do it without a story and you're going to do it without any buildup, why do it on a Saturday night against Game 2? It's not like that was a surprise. That was scheduled. You're up against college football. I don't know. I have questions. I'm hoping somebody will, come up with a good answer that makes sense, because I sure can.
Well, I tell you what, I'm pretty excited to see how this all shakes out for both the WWE and AEW. It feels like there's going to be some changing of the guards. There's some big opportunities for some big swings coming up in the next handful of months. And I'm curious to see how it all plays out. Of course, a lot of people have circled the Survivor Series, which, even though it was sold out immediately, they put more tickets on sale. They sold those out. They've opened up even more seating. I guess they keep changing the staging to fit more and more fans in there. And someone asked CM Punk, "You're going to be at Survivor Series?" And I thought he had a brilliant response. I think it's sold out. I've heard tickets are really tough to get. Of course, that keeps coming up because that show is in Chicago. I know we've said it before, but has your opinion changed? If Punk is going to WWE, and I know there's been reports out there that, they're not interested, but what would you think they would want to say, guys? Yes, we'd love to have him. Like, that ruins what wrestling is. If he shows up in WWE, would you do it in Chicago and get that monster pop, or do you wait, have a little patience, and hold it off for the Royal Rumble?
I would hold it off to the Royal Rumble. It's not like WWE's having a hard time getting great reactions.
No,
it's if they weren't. I mean, if it was a year and a half ago, I would say, yeah, you might want to give that a shot, or I would give it a shot if I was in a position to do it. But not now. Man, WWE's got so much momentum, and the crowd is so much behind them. I just can't imagine. And Punk's, if and I just don't really think it's ever going to happen. But for the sake of discussion, if Punk were to show up in WWE, no matter where he does it, it's going to get a massive pop. And for a company, a massive reaction. And for a company that's not desperate for one right now, I wouldn't waste it. I would do it where it meant the most. And for me, and I think for the audience, because the format of Royal Rumble begs for an opportunity like that, it just makes so much more sense. But that's just me. What do I know?
Wait,
I did the finger poke of doom. I know nothing.
Are you saying that you don't believe? You said you don't think it's likely to happen. You don't believe CM Punk is going to show up in WWE at any point?
I don't. I mean, I look, I'm not 100% convinced because it is all about business, and WWE historically is able and willing to get beyond issues, personal or otherwise. Warrior comes to mind. A cat named Eric Bischoff comes to mind. There's been a whole bunch of us where nobody would have ever imagined that certain people would get back or get into a WWE ring ever again, only to be surprised. So I'm not saying that I'm 100% sure, but my gut tells me no. And mostly because they just don't need them. There's no holes. Where's the holes in the WWE roster right now? Where's the holes in the product? We're getting ready to step into the hottest time of the year. This is wrestling's version of the Super Bowl coming up here over the next month or two.
All right.
And leading up to it. I just don't feel the need for it right now. They're live event business off the charts. They're selling out 10, 11, 12,000 seat arenas for SmackDown and for Raw. Merchandise is flying off the shelves. There's just no holes in their game right now. And it's not going to be that way forever. You know, everything ebbs and flows. It's not going to, I mean, I hope it does, but it'd be rare. And maybe somewhere down the road I see it, but I certainly don't see it coming up anytime soon. What do you think? Come on, what do you think?
Here's what I think. When was the last time you had a haircut? You want to run it back? I'll bet your hair against my hair that CM Punk is in WWE in the next calendar year.
Fuck it. Do it.
Okay. Halloween, one of us is getting a skint head next year. I'm looking forward to that.
Now, I'm only going to take that bet if you give me your words. You don't have some inside information because that
I don't have any inside information. I swear.
All right. All right. Well, clearly I don't either because nobody talks to me, but let's do that bet.
Well, here's why I'm doing that bet. And I'm just thinking.
Thinking.
Isn't WWE looking for a new deal for Monday Night Raw?
Sure.
They have about a year left on that.
Sure.
I think they're going to do whatever they can to stack the deck and get people invested. And they're going to do at least a couple Hail Marys. And I think one of them will be CM Punk.
You could be right. You could be right. I didn't think about the, renewal.
Yeah.
Or looking for another home for Raw. Still doesn't change my opinion though. I still believe what I'm saying. They just don't need him. I just don't see the added value. But like I said, I could be wrong. I'm not 100% convinced I'm right.
Well, I, for one, am really excited that we're going to get to shave your head again for charity.
But we're going to have to do it different. Maybe we do it on this show. Maybe we do it on a podcast, or we can do it in front of people. I don't care. You clearly know I have no problem shaving my head. I have no problem admitting I'm wrong. I have no problem being honest about my successes, my failures, or shaving my head in public. So I'll do it anywhere, anytime.
I just love that we're going to get to shave your head twice for the same reason, saying CM Punk ain't going to show up.
Now that pisses me off. That would actually get me hot.
Well, we see Eric Bischoff, or not Eric Bischoff, Ric Flair being carted out here. He's on a gurney. They're going around the graveyard, taking him around back, and we know the filthy animals are going to attack him there. So more silliness abound here, but yeah, just can't kill the nature boy. If you're noticing the time, it's 2:35, 57, 58, 59, 2 hours and 36 minutes in. There's only 10 minutes left in the show, and we've still got the main event. It's Goldberg and Sting. Meltzer would say, in the height of what appeared to be disorganization, Goldberg pinned Sting and was given the WCW heavyweight title in 3 minutes and 8 seconds. No referee showed up, and Sting seemed visibly upset by the lack of organization backstage. Finally, Robinson, who was beaten up in the previous match by Page, comes out showing no signs of battle weariness, nor even with a hair out of place. Tony Schiavone then announced this as a non-title match. The show was already running long by this point, so they had to rush and didn't have time to do much. Sting hit 3 stinger splashes, but Goldberg did a leapfrog into a spear, which looked good, and then pinned him after a jackhammer. Goldberg was given the belt and announced as the new world champion. Go figure. Sting ended the show dropping poor Robinson with a scorpion death drop, half a star. And Meltzer would say, to make up for the fact they weren't going to deliver with the advertised main event, they added a Goldberg Sting match at the end, partially to begin a Sting babyface turn, and they did the old Vern Gagne trick of sending fans home thinking they'd seen a world title change, only to watch TV and find out it wasn't the case. And looking at Gagne's business, and admittedly how fans react to the same angles 2 decades ago, is not for the most part relevant to how they would act today, because it's neither the same world nor the same business. It was okay in the short run, but eventually grew tiresome and hurt at the end. Now, this is all said because the next day, Sting's going to come out on TV and say, hey, I never agreed to defend the title. And he brings J.J. Dillon down to the ring to explain. And Dillon's going to announce the title is being vacated due to Sting's attack on referee Charles Robinson during the unsanctioned match, and says there's going to be a tournament to crown the new champion. Later that same night, which is the very next night from what we're watching, Goldberg would lose his U.S. Heavyweight Championship to Bret Hart. It's just a convoluted mess. It's a one day. Did he win it? Did he lose it? What the fuck's going on with Sting and the world title? This pay-per-view, I know the idea is we're trying to get them to watch the TV show, but if I had come out of my pocket $39.95 or $29.95 or whatever, I don't know that you'd get it again. This is not what I would have hoped for as a paying customer.
No, and it's a back-asswards approach that you think you're going to, produce a pay-per-view so that people will watch the television show. It's actually the opposite of that. They watch the television show and hopefully they'll buy the pay-per-view, but whatever. Again, it's hard to really be critical of Russo without being so redundant, because some of the things that I find so appalling about Vince Russo as a professional and as a person is that it's so obvious and it's just redundant to keep talking about it. He's a fraud. He was a creative fraud. Simply, he was a good salesman. He's a great salesman. He's charming as fuck, but he just didn't understand television, pure and simple. He didn't understand story. He's a writer that didn't understand what an arc was. He didn't understand an arc or a 3-act structure until we ended up working together in TNA, and he resisted it. Now he's talking about it like, he's always believed in it and understands it. He doesn't, and it's clear here. It's obvious. It's so obvious. And it was clear in everything that he did, which was why Brad Siegel called me sometime around January, February, and asked me to come back, despite the fact that they had just sent me home months before, guaranteed me two and a half years into my contract, which was worth well over $1 million at the time, and had to write me a brand new contract and guarantee me a 3-movie deal with TNT. That will tell you everything that you need to know about the confidence that Turner had in Vince Russo's understanding of television and or wrestling.
I'll tell you this, it's not what we would have hoped for, but look at the crowd. Everybody's standing as you see Goldberg and Sting both standing in their respective corners. Sting stepping out of the ring, walking around the outside.
There's money involved too. A lot of things.
You see a referee in here? We have a ref.
Well, I didn't even notice that. There is no referee. Charles Robinson.
And Conrad, do you know when Sting turned heel? When did that happen? Do you remember?
They were trying that a month prior because they had the red and yellow Hulk Hogan. Sting as a heel never worked, did it?
No. It's the same situation with DDP. It's just, man, it's oil and water. Square peg, round hole.
Sting, man. Yeah.
Duck that can't fly. Whatever you want to say. It just doesn't work.
I don't know why, but duck that won't fly. That tickles me. So here's Charles Robinson. And man, they're going at it right here at the end. By the way, a little context to the Hogan angle. The Hogan angle, of which part 2 went down exactly as was scripted weeks ago, is at this point supposed to lead to a Hogan hiatus, with the idea that he's not getting along with management and come back as anti-management Steve Austin type figure probably early next year. With the talk, he'll come back as a real person using the ring name Terry Bollea as opposed to the caricature of Hulk Hogan he's become.
That would never happen.
To do shoot style promos. The negative of that is, to make all this work, it has been made clear on TV that Russo and Ferrara ordered him to do the job, and he refused since he has creative control. And this was the end result. At least it gives him time to rest his knee. Yeah, I don't know that we would have ever seen a Terry Bollea on TV.
Absolutely. This was either Russo or somebody on his behalf feeding shit-stained Dave Meltzer information. That's where that came from, because that would never, ever, ever happen. Guarantee it. There's very few things I can guarantee, but I can guarantee that.
All righty. We're guaranteeing things on the show today. Want to thank everybody for showing up and hanging out with us earlier today in our live watch along of this program. You can get all these shows that we're doing early and ad free over at adfreeshows.com if you haven't already. And that's one of the best parts, getting to be a part of the live recording. How about the big spear? Oh, there's the big kick from Goldberg. I'm thankful he didn't get the Bret Hart version of that thing.
Ouch. Ooh, that was a pretty wicked kick. In martial arts, that would be considered, I think, a spin hook kick. It looked like a hook kick. And that's a dangerous kick to throw as well when you're spinning around 360 degrees. That's a tough one.
Not one, not two, but three stinger splashes. And he's going to be picking Goldberg up by the head. Let's take a listen here to the finish.
Talk about it. Now even all he does. He's up. Stick down. He spears him. The man is a winner in Vegas. But he's not done. No, not yet. Not yet at all. He points to the roof of the MGM Grand. He's going to the penthouse where the high rollers hang out. What an accomplishment! Goldberg! What a pay-per-view! Ladies and gentlemen, the winner is new heavyweight champion of the world, Goldberg.
But not really. We'll announce tomorrow night that it wasn't actually a sanctioned match. Yeah, hell, we should have known that. There wasn't even a fucking referee out here to start the thing. But still, Goldberg leaves with the physical possession of the belt, something Jay White knows a lot about. But I'm sure this received its fair share of criticism. I mean, you've made the analogy before that this was sort of WCW's WrestleMania. And you think back a few years prior to this at WrestleMania 9, I remember asking my friend who got the pay-per-view, hey man, Bret Hart and Yokozuna, who's the champ? Hulk Hogan. No, Hulk Hogan was in a tag match with Brutus Barber against IRS and Ted DiBiase. I'm talking about the world title match. Like, who's the world champion? Was it our champion Bret Hart, or was it the challenger Yokozuna? When it was all over, who was the world champion? Yeah, Hulk Hogan. Sort of the same thing here. Fast forward. Hey, who won the world title match? Hulk Hogan or Sting? Goldberg. What? It's a whole new era. It's the WCW Russo era. And this was the first pay-per-view. This is the first time you've seen it. 24 years later, what'd you think, Eric?
With the exception of the Goldberg Sid match and this match, which was unadvertised, I think it was the drizzling shits. No other way to say it. Give it a 3 on a scale of 1 to 10. The fact that, the cameras worked and the lights were on and people showed up gives it a 3. But beyond that, it was freaking horrible. And this is coming from a guy that's produced some pretty shitty pay-per-views in my career. This one was the shits.
Well, we hope that we haven't been the shits, but we'd love to have your reviews. Leave us a 5-star review if you think we've earned it. Speaking of 5-star reviews, before we get out of here, Eric, I know that you're a big connoisseur of this sort of thing, and I wanted to get your opinion because we haven't talked about it on the show, but there's a film that's been released in theaters that I feel like is right up your alley, Killers of the Flower Moon, the Martin Scorsese film with Robert De Niro and Leonardo DiCaprio. Did you have a chance to check it out? What'd you think?
You know I did. And it is absolutely phenomenal. First of all, it's a true story. It's about the Osage Indian tribe in Oklahoma. We're going back to the early 1900s, 1910, 1920. And at one point in time, the Osage Indians were the richest group of people in America because there was oil underneath the land that they were given by the federal government, the reservation. There were allotments, if you will. They had the mineral rights to those allotments. Anyway, without going into the premise of the story in any more detail, because it's a true story and it's based on history, I automatically, I'm at a 6 on a scale of 1 to 10 before I even buy my ticket, because I just love those kinds of movies. Martin Scorsese did an amazing, amazing job directing this. Leonardo DiCaprio, if he doesn't get an Academy Award for this, I don't know who would or why. It's a long movie, so know that going in, but it's a part of American history, and it's accurate, and it's so, so interesting, and the performances were amazing. Direction, Martin Scorsese did a great job. It was a well-written movie. It was shot well. Just everything about it, I absolutely loved. I'll probably see it again, to be honest with you. It was that good.
Be sure to eat before you go. It's a 3.5 hour movie. So with the previews, you're going to be there 4 hours, but I too recommend it. I think it's over 90% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's a great show, and we hope you guys thought we had a great show today. We'll be back next week talking about a little AEW, a little old school, a little keeping up with the modern stuff. In the meantime, we've got a Raw in the way, a SmackDown in the way, a Saudi Arabia event, a Dynamite, a Collision. Oh my. See you this time next week right here on 83 Weeks with Eric Bischoff. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson here to tell you a little more about what AdFreeShows.com is all about. Get early, ad-free access to more than a dozen of your favorite wrestling podcasts every single week, starting at just $9. That's less than 20 cents an episode each month. And yes, you can listen to them all directly through Apple Podcasts or your regular podcast apps. How easy is that? Ad-Free Shows also has thousands of hours worth of bonus content and docuseries like Title Chase, Eric Fires Back, Conversations with Conrad, and The Insiders. Plus new series like The Book with David Crockett, Monday Mailbags with Mike Chioda and Nick Patrick, and a whole lot more. And you want to talk about early? You can't get any earlier than listening to the shows live. You can be a part of the live studio audience as we record the podcast. Plus, ride shotgun alongside your favorite childhood heroes for live watch-alongs, Q&As, and other interactive experiences every single month. Come on now, see for yourself what thousands of other wrestling fans from around the world have discovered, that AdFreeShows.com is the best value in wrestling. Check it out today, and hey, when you do, the first week is completely free. AdFreeShows.com.